let us know when we're good to go, Trent.
Okay, good to go.
Excellent. All right, everybody, it is 6:03 p.m. and we'll call the special meeting of the Board of Education to order. I just would like to remind everybody that if you're not speaking, if you could mute your line so we don't have any echo. And we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. All right, so first off, we have on the consent agenda our approval of our minutes from our last regular meeting, which was June 9th, and our special meeting, which was on June 11th. Both of these are under the consent agenda, and I would like a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved. Eileen Baker.
Thanks, Eileen. Do we have a second?
I'll
Second.
Okay. Did you get that, Trent?
I'm sorry, who's that second?
I can second it.
Okay. Was that you, Karina? Sorry.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay. I don't know who the second was, Trent. I still couldn't hear.
I thought it was Jim originally. Am I right, Jim?
I wasn't sure if I was loud enough. Sure. Let's go for it.
All right, we'll take it.
Okay. So if you can unmute your lines, board members, and aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Aye. All right, so moved. Thank you all. All right, so first up on our agenda this evening is a discussion from, well, it's Jan and Julie on our agenda, but we've got Carl here as well to talk to us about test wells at the high school.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you, Carl, for joining us this night. And I think you brought Jim with you. And this is just an update to the board. A number of months ago, we talked about the possibility of the town needing to dig some test wells. And in fact, some have been done in the past. And First Selectman Fortuna is here to talk to you tonight about the overall project and what these test wells mean right now, what they're looking to do right now. First Selectman Fortuna.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank the Board of Education for making the time. I did bring Jim Vanoli along because he's the project manager for the WPCA, and if I stumble a little bit, Jim will be there for the details. So I've been before the board several times with regards to the WPCA project, but we're at a point in the project where we're dealing with our conventional systems, and we are looking at perhaps the high school fields as a possibility for several hundred homes. And a lot of this isn't even, I mean, people haven't been following this too closely. I mean, the WPCA project has been out there for 20 years, of course. But despite the pandemic and all this stuff, the WPCA project moves along. We are under a consent order. The long and short of it is, if we were even to consider the high school property, we need to get a groundwater, levels basically over the course of the next year to determine if it's even a feasible project. And it may not be, to be honest with you. I believe we are not installing a whole heck of a lot of wells on the high school property. Jim, what is it? I think it's another 3 or 4 on the property, Jim? Can't hear you, Jim, if you're on there. Jim Vanoli?
There are approximately 10 new ones. They'll be installed in the course of 1 week with 2 wells per day. And they'll all be below grade.
Okay. And then there are also several off-site there's 3 more that are offsite, and I have to. One of them actually is on private property, and I'm seeking permission from the private property owner. So what's going to happen is what we would have is that we would install these monitoring wells. Julie Pendleton was on the last call with Fuss and O'Neill, the town's engineers. And we would coordinate with any athletic programs that are going on. The monitoring wells would be installed. They would be filled. They'd be leveled off. They do need to be checked now and then for readings, but not all that frequently. There'll be very little disturbance at the end of the day once they're installed. And there may not even be a lot of disturbance while they are being installed. Just so you know, the installation is basically the size of a van with a grill on the back of it. And it's not like a gigantic truck that digs a well or anything like that. And these monitoring wells would essentially take readings over the course of, I think, the next year, and we take a look at the results and determine if there is a path forward. To be honest with you, I'm not looking to get into many details on whether there is a path forward or not. The next may be. There's a lot of noise in the background, but, so I don't know if everybody can hear me okay. But you know, if the water levels were to be substantially good enough that we might even look at a next step, the next step would be a load test, but that would not be for probably another year. And a load test, I mean, to be honest with you, a load test is definitely more destructive, but that would have to be, again, coordinated with the schools to determine where that would be done so that it would be as little impact as possible to any of the fields. So, but I really don't want to get ahead of ourselves on this. We'd like to install some wells. We'd like to monitor them for the next year. This is not a comfortable project for anybody. Believe me, it hasn't been comfortable for the town for 20 years. I wish it wasn't on my plate. I wish it wasn't on the town's plate. We're under a judgment to figure something out, and we could bore this board for the next 3 hours telling you all the work that has gone into the trying to resolve this problem to date. And here we are. There is no other suitable piece of property if we were going to do this the way we're proposing to do it. You know, there's really 2 options on the table at the end of the day. That's putting a sewer plant on the river or discharging in the ground. And we've looked all over Old Saybrook for areas to possibly discharge in the ground. And the town high school fields are pretty much what we've come across. The good news is we've reduced the number of properties that would have to discharge. It's basically a septic system, just so everybody knows, which you already have on the below the fields now. But the number of households we would seek to continue to winnow down, and so that there'd be as little as possible, whatever system would end up being built would be as small as possible. So we are still working on that. Jim, is there anything else you want to add?
I think maybe the only thing that I would like to hear a little bit about tonight, Carl, if we have the information, is exactly what a load test is. I don't even know.
Jim, why don't you describe what a load test is?
A load test is it's a physical test that's done in the field. You dig a big bathtub, if you will, and you fill it with water, and you continue filling it with water at a prescribed rate, and that determines how much absorptiveness, if you will, that the soil has. That's the physical test, that's the determination. Until that time, we're working with samples and computer models and coefficients and formulae and this and that. So after this 1 year or so of groundwater monitoring, we'll do a groundwater mounding analysis, because as the water mounds as it hits an impervious surface, whether that be a rock or another body of water, the groundwater. So it mounds up and then slowly dissipates. So all our computer programs show what we should anticipate based on the parameters from the soil test and the monitoring wells. But the actual field load test would be the physical proof and the determining factor. That's a ways away. That's at least a year and a half away. The groundwater monitoring wells are scheduled to be installed starting on August the 3rd. I spoke with Matt Germain of Fuss & O'Neill 4:30 today, and he has all the equipment ordered. And again, all these monitoring wells will be below grade. So that actual field test, if it even comes to be, will be a year and a half away from now.
Thank you. I guess I'll turn it over to you, Chairperson Barrows, to let us know if there's any other questions.
Yeah, thanks, Carl and Jim. I appreciate your presentation to us tonight. Are there any questions for Carl or Jim from the board?
Could you just make sure people speak loud enough because it's very low?
Okay. Thanks, Eileen.
So this is George. I have a quick question.
Go ahead, George.
And this is a really dumb question. You're not digging beneath the astroturf, right?
No.
I think it's an excellent question, George.
That is an excellent question.
Just to make sure.
Yeah.
Tara, I have a couple of questions, if I could.
Go right ahead. Yep, go right ahead.
Thank you. And so I don't want this is very scintillating information. And despite that, why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind it? Is it because is it 10 houses they don't have the capacity to discharge, or you can help me understand that?
Are you familiar with the WPCA, the program that the town is involved in over the last 30 years or 20 or 30 years? No?
Probably not.
So many towns along the shoreline have been ordered by the DEP many of these towns have a lot of cottages, and they're overbuilt, and they can't, and the groundwater is very close to the surface, and they really can't support a septic system. So the DEP ordered Old Saybrook, Clinton, Westbrook, and their Old Lyme. There are many towns along the shoreline to say, and they sued these towns. They sued us, we lost, and said, you need to remediate the situation because you're polluting Long Island Sound. So in Old Saybrook, that involved about approximately 2,000 properties. We've remediated about 1,500 of them. And here we are, the last 500. And honestly, drive by Chalker Beach, because a lot of the houses are in Chalker Beach, several houses in Plum Bank, some houses in Indian Town, but just drive down Chalker Beach any day of the week and, you can see water in side yards because it just doesn't drain. So a lot of those houses are unable to have a functioning septic system, and we are under a court order to remediate that.
Okay. And so then my other question is that while these test wells are dug and for that year and a half duration before the next possible step, it's covered up and the fields are usable?
Yes. Unequivocally.
Thanks, Karina. Any other questions from the board for Carl and Jim?
Baker. So my property actually needed to have that septic, redone, and it's a lot of work. So my question maybe is on similar to Karina's. So are there other homes there that are not able to be dug to be a septic? To take a look at their septic? What's the rationale again?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Yeah. What's the rationale? So my home here on Saybrook Acres needed to have a septic, according to that lawsuit. So my first question is for digging test wells. So do those homes need wells? Is that why we're digging them?
No. So we are looking at potentially putting can you hear me okay, Ashley?
Yeah, perfect, thanks.
So we are looking at potentially putting in, if you will, a large disposal field under the playing fields. So those houses in Chalker Beach would have their effluent pumped to another place, and then it would be treated, and then it would be the effluent would be dispersed under the fields, and it would be basically great drinking water at that point.
Go for it. Sorry.
We joke about it, but it's true.
It's true. Is there any cost associated that we, the town bears, or do the homeowners have a responsibility there?
Honestly, offline, it's probably best for me to take that offline with you. I'd love to have a coffee with you someday, and I can explain the whole financial model. The answer is, it is a $43 million project. It's the largest capital project that the town has ever undertaken, just about. I don't know that there's a bigger one. There was a referendum in 2009 at which this authorization to spend was granted, and it's a $43 million project. It roughly breaks out to 50. I'm just going to give you a very rough 50% on the homeowner, 25% is a grant, and 25% is a bond. So roughly 10 to 12 million be on the town side. And we've already expended several million, more than several $1 million of that 43 million on the town end. It's not, you're on mute, I think, but it is not a, this is, and I think a lot of the people have been in town a long time and who have heard me and Mike Pace before me, and going back to Barbara Maynard, to be honest with you, it goes back a long ways, this issue.
Other questions for Carl?
Carl, this is Alan. In terms of the impact on the fields, there's no impact with a pump house or pipe work. There will be pipe work, I assume, dug to the leaching fields, but there's not any pump houses or any facilities that would be located above ground, right, on school grounds?
Again, we're probably getting way, way, way ahead of ourselves here. But the answer is we're not looking to construct a building on school grounds, if it ever came to that, okay? And again, we are, if you're talking about a year and a half for monitoring wells, we're probably, if you were to construct this, who knows when it would be, 3 to 5 years?
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Other questions for Carl? All right, then. All right, well, Carl and Jim, thank you very much for coming and presenting to us tonight, and we look forward to hearing more from you. So
I want to extend a very warm thank you to the Board of Ed for entertaining us and listening to us. This is just not something any of us particularly want to be involved in, I can tell you that, but it is something that needs to be addressed, and we're doing our best. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you, Jim, for joining.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay.
You guys are welcome
Thank
to
you.
stick around for the rest of our meeting if you want to, but I'll understand if you go out and enjoy the beautiful evening now that it's finally cooling down a little.
No, I got to go to Board of Finance in 40 minutes, so that's where I'm
Carl,
going.
you know how to have fun, Carl.
I know. See you later. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. So moving on to our next agenda item, which is our strategic plan kickoff. And Jan, I'll hand this over to you.
Sure. Never let it be said that this Board of Education doesn't entertain lots of different topics. So we go from test wells to 5-year planning for the district. And joining us this evening so that the Board of Education can, quote, meet with her is Isabel Stevenson from the Connecticut Center for School Change. As I said to you as we were going through the process of hiring, Isabel is well known to a number of our teachers and administrators here in district because we've worked with her and the center on a number of projects, not the least of which is coaching instruction for our instructional leadership team. And so without further ado, I'm going to invite Isabel to introduce herself. You also have in your electronic notebooks the timeline that Isabel and I created that we thought was both appropriate in its speed, in how thorough it is, and also kind of trying to work around some deadlines that we are approaching as we try to open schools here at the start of the year. So all of that was considered as we move forward with this plan. So Isabel, if you would, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. I've never actually had to follow effluent dispersal before. So this is a new one. Welcome to the Board of Education. So I am very glad to be working with Old Saybrook. As Jan just said, I've got to know several people in the district, some of the educators in the district, and they are a good bunch and a fun bunch. And also I've spent some time talking to Jan, but also reviewing the documents that you have regarding your strategic plan. So I would say that of all the districts that I work with on strategic planning and in all the plans that I've looked at, I would say that you are the most assiduous in actually following up and documenting the progress that you have made. So this is a relatively novel experience for me to actually come into a district and be able to see right off their webpage exactly what they have done with their previous strategic plan. And I know that Jan takes great pride in the fact that the strategic plan is a guiding document for the district. So I'm a little intimidated, actually, at the idea of having to come in and provide something in terms of a process for you to come up with something that's clearly been so important for you over the last few years. So Jan, I put together a few slides. It just has some pictures. Is that okay if I share that?
Yeah, Trent, can you give her permission to share the screen? Sure, absolutely, Isabel.
All right. Oh God, I hope I do this right.
Hold on, I gotta.
Google Chrome share. I'm now the presenter. Oh. So I don't actually know what that means. Do you see anything different?
No, not yet.
Down, if you are looking towards the bottom, there should be some icons, and the third one in is share content.
It says share content. Yes. So I clicked that, and nothing happened. I don't know why that is.
Do you have more than one computer screen?
No, I don't. Just on my laptop. Never mind. I'm just going to try one thing and then we'll completely ignore it.
You can also, as a plan B, Isabel, email it to Trent and me, and one of us can get it presented from here.
Sure. I wonder what the fastest way of doing that is. It was really just some pictures because, like, if we're not in person, it's just a little not challenging exactly, but more fun to see some photographs. But that's okay. Never mind.
Okay.
So what you have in your electronic binder is like a timeline of a series of meetings, really, that I think of as recursive. We try and make it so that the people involved really get multiple opportunities to give their input and to review and revise. We try and make sure that the time that we get with the groups that we're working with, whether they are kind of a core team or the district leadership team or the board or parents or whatever the group is, that we maximize that time. So we try and stay away from worksheets and templates that spend time on what I would call wordsmithing. We would rather spend time metaphorically in the room with people, getting their ideas, helping everyone get their thoughts on the table, and then generating documents for then you to look at and review, rather than actually generating the documents in the room. So I would say that's I don't know if that's different or how different that is from what you've done before, but I would say that that's something that we value very highly. We try and be very efficient. We try and ask good questions and targeted questions. We try and involve as many people as possible. Actually, I think that's probably all that I really wanted you to know, but I'm very happy to answer whatever questions you have.
Just as a reminder, before the board starts asking questions, if there are some, we're trying to time this again so that it's expedient, so that we are able to get any steps into the 21-22 budget process, so that December timeframe really becomes very important for having something written that we can then put a placeholder into that first draft of the budget that comes forward to the Board of Education, and then something very complete by mid-February, which matches the timing of our submission of the budget to the town. And so that was all very deliberate in the decision making. And one of the things that I was hoping we could talk about tonight, Isabel and I and the administrators and ILT had identified some stakeholders, and we had identified them as parents, students, all staff, Board of Education, the community at large, including elected officials and other department leaders, as being important stakeholders to the process and as being keepers of information and knowledge about our school districts, either as consumers or as people who work here, or people who have been observing and watching us for some time. But if there's any other groups or any other individuals that you would like us to consider including, I think now is a great time to put them into the mix and either add them to a group here or create another one.
I see Isabel's PowerPoint is up now.
Yeah, Isabel, your PowerPoint's up.
I know, right?
Poor WebEx has been having a lot of trauma lately of trying to do things quickly. I've been experiencing this in my own job, and
Wow.
I feel bad for the poor system.
So I put in, let me see, I know how to do this. Present. I just put in some pictures that I thought, so this was actually a strategy planning workshop that we ran last June down at Connecticut College. So that's me up front, clearly having a good time. I put in a couple of publications because I was just going to establish my bona fides. So this on the left is an article that I published in the Kaplan, I think like a couple of years ago now. Which was very exciting at the time. And then this is a book on strategic planning for educational leaders that's coming out in December. My co-author, Jenny Weiner, is a professor at UConn.
She's terrific.
And then this is just kind of a sense of the backwards mapping that we like to do. So this is work that I was doing with Derby earlier, or last year now, I guess. And over on the right-hand side is the vision that they're developing for high-quality instruction, which is very much present in your strategic plan, right? You clearly have a theory of action around the relationship between instruction and student achievement and attaining the portrait of the graduate, which I'm very happy to see very much embedded in your mission and that you're aligned behind that. And so this was just a picture of a backwards mapping exercise that we did to try and figure out all the things that had to happen from central office through to the classroom to make sure that their portrait of the graduate was realized. That's it. That's kind of all I've got.
Awesome. Thank you. So any questions from the board? And I see, Karina, you have your hand up. Excellent job. Wow. That's next level, Karina.
I'm figuring out to make this Zoom thing work for us, or excuse me, WebEx. So I have a couple of questions. One is, I love the pictures of the brainstorming and backwards mapping. And clearly, given the current situation, the ability to conduct those sort of brainstorming sessions and work groups is, I would imagine, significantly impacted. And so what steps are you taking? How will you do that given our current state of pandemic crisis?
Right. Yes, exactly. No, actually, we've had to get expert really quickly on all kinds of different platforms. So we use Zoom a lot. We use Google Docs a lot. We've become really good at putting people in breakout rooms and giving them a Google Doc to work from. We organize the work in folders so that people can see, there's like one umbrella folder that everyone's a member of. We've already started that, actually. We already have a shared drive. And then, we create folders for the groups, and so they have their documents there. And in many respects, it actually makes life easier because, people record on a Google Doc or they record on, some other platform like Padlet or, whatever we set up, and then it's there for you. You haven't lost anything in translation, taking it from chart paper or report out to have somebody type it up. Right. So I know that, like tonight is a great example of it's never quite as easy, right? When you're trying to use an online platform, and it's usually not as much fun. Yeah. But it's certainly perfectly doable.
Good. Yeah, I think it impacts the creative process slightly, but I agree with you. I think you can work around it and use the tools that are available. So I have two additional questions that are related to one another. One is really for Jan, the work plan that was in our folder for review in preparation for this meeting. So you've reviewed and approved that, and the first deliverable is to clarify expectations and preferences. Is that on track? It sounds like what you were just saying, Isabella, is that you've already started on that, I'm assuming. But I just wanted to check in with, Jan's perspective of the work plan, and are we already on track?
Yes, I think we're on track with this. The original plan that was part of the center's proposal had an earlier start date, and life got in the way. And so we have this clarified and extended timeline. The original one had us ending around the end of December, beginning of January. This one's extended. July 2020 is the end of step one. And really, other than item number 4, which Isabel has acquainted with, and really the community is knowledgeable about, I think there might be a little bit more work to do there, but I would say we are pretty much done with number 1. And we have some time, though not a lot of time, between now and the end of step number 2, item number 2 phase. So yes, in short, yes. Thanks.
Great. Other questions for Isabel or Jan or Amity on this process?
This is George.
Go ahead, George.
Just a quick question, I guess, a comment, actually. So, clearly right now, the COVID dominates almost all conversation, but this is a plan for 5 years, and probably will end, hopefully before 5 years, we'll all be crazy by then. And it will end very abruptly. And so, how do we guard against not having the COVID topic be front and center and built around it when all of a sudden, it will all of a sudden end? And basically mask what's underneath much more important 5 years.
George, that's such a good question, and one that we asked when we sat down to talk and to put this together. And that's actually one of the reasons why we decided that a late September start due date for item number 2, phase number 2, was important. We don't want the chaos that, let's just call it what it is, the chaos and the unknowns of this summer to have a negative impact or any kind of a skewing impact on what needs to be a much larger plan that has to exist long past the days of COVID. So we did talk about that, and we did talk about setting the context, and Isabel or Amity, or actually there were a number of people in that meeting. I don't know if you want to share anything more about how we are very cognizant of guarding against that, of whenever we introduce topics to stakeholder groups, that we kind of try to strip away the whole issue of COVID and say we have to think of our school district, not entirely, because obviously we've learned things from experiencing this, but we need to strip away that issue and not let it become the predominant guiding point in what should outlive this current situation. Isabel, anything more?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think once you name it, right, and make sure that people have a chance to talk about it, and then say, okay, great, let's then look beyond that. Because I think one of the things that we also talked about was that this experience has been amazing, right? However you want to cut it, it's been extraordinary, and people have had to learn a lot. And so we also don't want to pretend that it hasn't happened, because there are many, many things that people have had to learn that we can now deploy purposefully in the service of students that we might not have thought about before. So I completely agree with you that it shouldn't be the whole thing, but I would love to believe that we can capitalize on what we have learned to build a better plan.
Interesting. It's a really good perspective. That was a good question, George. I hadn't even really thought about that. Other questions regarding this process?
Yeah, this is Karina again. So mine is sort of on the heels of George's question. I agree with everything that was just said. And in healthcare, there's a very strong messaging that this will be around for probably at least 2 years. And so I guess my question is sort of around Isabel's comment with respect to, I do believe that rather than, it shouldn't overpower, but it should inform. And I think, is there a need to access healthcare experts to help inform how our strategic plan can support the impact that this COVID crisis will have on our educational strategiit priorities? You know what I mean? I think that I don't want it to overpower or overburden, but it clearly, it had a significant impact this year. And I think we need to consider how it will inform going forward, like you said, the discovering of things that we may not have been pushed to previously, and or how things need to be enhanced so that they can affect our students in a more positive way and their learning experience.
I'm looking at Jan to see if she wants to talk.
No, if I might, very interesting way of thinking about it. And I automatically went to thinking about our district's Dr. Kondulis, and how involved he is with us. We're very fortunate that our relationship with him is unique in the land of medical advisors, and school district relationships. So he is, I think, a very important stakeholder that we want to be involved in. He's also a parent, so double benefit to us. We also, through this crisis, have developed a relationship with our regional health district. I now have them literally on speed dial and talk to them multiple times a week. So I think they also could be involved. And of course, emergency management has been involved all along. So I think the stakeholders are right there. We just have to make sure we include them. And thank you for bringing that up, because I'm not sure I would have thought of it.
So this question is for Jan. It's Eileen Baker.
Yes.
So I'm so thrilled that you're going to have students as part of your stakeholder group.
Of course.
And I'm wondering that as part of your students' exit interviews, students have given you feedback. So not only are you considering current students, but are you considering the feedback that you might have received from students exiting Old Saybrook, so that some of their suggestions can be infused in this new strategic plan?
Again, kind of fortunate, because I think some of them are going to be around this summer and fall. Those who recently graduated, not fortunate for them. That was a terrible thing to say. You know what I meant. You know, I love this class that just graduated. But, you know, we may have better access to them as community members and another stakeholder group to reach out to. I was hoping this would happen tonight. This is exactly what we needed to hear.
Other questions or comments for Jan? Awesome. Well, I think this is really interesting, Jan and Isabel and Amity and Kathy, everybody who's involved. I look forward to seeing who you guys involve in the process. I think, you know, all the points that brought up tonight, you know, are interesting facets to this whole process. You know, it's strategic, right? So we're thinking about the future, we're thinking about what we want to look like in the future, and, you know, kind of broad strokes, but it is interesting, like, how you can kind of incorporate some of the more tactical things we've had to do over the past year, and how we've had to execute on things in a different way. You know, sometimes you get forced into these new mindsets. It does bring on good creative thinking.
Yeah, it's a challenge doing this work right now. And I really did contemplate. I kind of got cold feet and thought we should just not do it. Let's just extend a year. I forget who I said that to a number of people just to test my idea. And I got enough pushback that I realized let's move forward, because I do think that it's going to force us into creativity and into forward thinking and into the future at an accelerated rate. So there is good that's coming from bad. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a bright spot. It's going to be exciting. We're going to get a great opportunity to get feedback, real-time feedback from people, and incorporate it as we did last time. But as I said to Isabel, I think our expectation for engagement can be higher, because I know the staff knows that we talk about the strategic plan all the time. I mean, the students know when they're talking to me that they find a way to talk about the strategic plan. And it's really it's really exciting, because I think they will take this farther than we could have before.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Dan. It's going to be really interesting. And I do always find that these things that you get forced into, you know, you might talk about them in kind of lofty ways before you have to do them. And then all of a sudden it's not quite so precious when you actually have to execute it. And that's the great thing about having gone through a strategic plan and living it, right?
Yeah.
It's super to put it, like you said, you want to burnish it and kind of put it on the shelf, but you know, you guys have lived it now. And so you can be better prepared as you go through it, you know, to understand what you're actually setting yourselves up for.
Right.
It's
It's exciting.
awesome.
A little scary, very
exciting.
exciting.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Isabel, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was very nice to meet you. I liked your presentation, good pictures.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And, you know, can I just say thank you for your work on the board? You do good work, right? You do good, unpaid, important, time-consuming work. And as a parent myself, I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Good to see you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. stuff. All right. So that brings us to our plan to reopen schools 2020, 2021.
And nothing could introduce this next part of our conversation more than what you just said about, in theory, it's all very precious. And then when you have to roll up your sleeves and put something together and create a document or a project, and this is so much more than a document, that will move a district forward in unprecedented times, this is the document that does that. So I just want to talk a very high level first before we get into the document itself. The document was started officially on June 29th. That's when we were told to get our documents together. We created reopen committees on March or April 1st, I think it was, because we knew that eventually, to Dr. Chang's point, all things change and we'll get beyond this and we need to get ready to reopen. And in fact, that's where we find ourselves right now. And I want to make sure, not only for the board, but for anyone watching, that we understand that we have been directed by the state of Connecticut to open all of our schools to all of our students 5 days a week. That is not an option. That's not a suggestion. That is a requirement right now. We have been told that any day that is not open to all students 5 days a week will not be considered a school day. So that's the baseline. So we have to create a full reopen plan. That does not mean that parents can't choose to opt their children out, and I'll use the word from the state document, temporarily, though temporarily is not defined, based on specific concerns. So we know we're going to have students with health concerns. We may have students who have family members who live with them who are high risk. We may have other concerns in families, and we are going to work with families the best we can to support them through that. We are also hoping that the majority of them will choose to come to school full-time as being directed right now, or if the state changes direction, they may tell us to open up on what they're calling the hybrid, which would be approximately 50% capacity on any given day. Or we may also be told to close all of our schools and go to a distance learning model. And I want you to know that Amity Goss is spending the majority of her time right now on creating a robust distance model. We've been provided with some excellent resources by the state, by Columbia University, and some of our colleagues from across the state. And so that work is going on. That's spinning over here while we're working on this other stuff. So that is sort of the high level view of this. Tonight, we're going to talk about the calendar too, but in September, we are being told that we will open, and we will be prepared to do that. And so much work has been going on behind the scenes to collect input from families, to vet what we're creating with lay people, students. I have a student group that's meeting on Thursdays right now. We are still going to be, for the rest of the summer, passing this back and forth to those groups of people and different groups of people, staff members. But we will also, it already is right now in the hands of the Connecticut, the River Area Health District. They've been looking at it since Saturday, and the chief of police has it because he is not in his role as chief of police, but in his role as emergency management director. So he will be weighing on things like traffic when we don't have everybody taking buses, exiting and entering, safety concerns. And we had Scott Martinson and Sherry Carlson from Connecticut River here a couple of times over the last few weeks, looking at nurses' offices, lunchrooms, getting advice on bathrooms. I had a meeting with them yesterday with a couple of other superintendents. So nothing's being done in a vacuum. Everything is being vetted. It will continue to be. And I think the final thing I'll say before we dive into this is an iterative process. You've seen 3 versions of it so far. We got different advice on bathrooms yesterday. I got different advice on how to handle a presumptive positive and a positive today. And CDC came out with some different advice just yesterday. So it's not over. I'm not asking the board to vote on this tonight. The state doesn't require the board to vote on this, and there's a very good reason why I'm not asking you. I think I'd have to call you back together every 4 or 5 days and vote on it again. The state is asking us every time we change it that we resubmit it, and we will honor that. We'll do that every time. So with that, that's all the high level. Does anyone want to ask a general question before we start walking through it? If that's what you'd like me to do.
This is George.
Yes.
Just not a question, but just a comment up front. I mean, I think I've seen some of these evolve over the last few months, and I just want to just say, I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of work, and just credit to you and your team for putting this together. It's a monumental task, and I don't think people can even begin to appreciate how much effort and work was put into this. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. This was, this is quite a team of people who did this. It's amazing, the people who stepped up, and some of these people don't work in the summer. They're not getting paid to do this, and they've called us up and said, I want to focus on this. I'm concerned about transitions. And they're writing things and submitting them, and you'd be so proud. I'm afraid to say a name because there's too many to say, but just an amazing response from folks and parents sending me suggestions all the time. Just really great community behavior. Now,
Jan?
Yes.
Jan Furman here. First of all, I don't know if congratulations is the right word, or my sympathies, but I agree with George. It's a monumental task, and it's changing all the time. And thank you and your team for all your hard work. I don't know, I didn't see this, but maybe I skipped over it. Is there a process for staff who are concerned either because they are in a high risk group, whether it's because of age or pre-existing health conditions, or they have someone in their household who's at risk because of pre-existing health conditions? Is there a process for them to go through in terms of what will happen to them based on having to reopen and medical advice telling them that they cannot or should not go to work?
Yes. On page 43 of the plan, there's references to EEOC, ADA, FMLA, EPFLA, Family First, Coronas Act. These are all state and federal laws, most of them federal laws, that create layers of protection. And I have advice from board counsel on how to respond to each situation. The hard thing, Jan, is each of those will need to be responded to individually. So those are
right. I understand, and it will be very time consuming.
And they keep asking me to ask my HR director to do that work, and I keep looking.
You mean both of the HR directors?
Okay, we got it. But yes, there is a plan in place, and we'll be responding to those. And we did a staffing survey to find out where we stood right now. All the surveys we've done so far, again, talk about iterative. They'll be done again. The staff surveys will be done again. The family surveys will be done again, because people's minds are changing as the information is coming forward.
I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Jan, I have a question.
Yes.
So again, I'll just echo everybody else's comments. This was an incredible amount of work and so well done. Have we been able, and Julie as well, have we been able to secure all of the PPE supplies that we anticipate needing? What's the status of that? And then I guess the very broad question of cost associated with all of this.
Yes, we're prepared to talk about that tonight as well.
Okay.
Yes, Julie Pendleton has done a ton of work to get PPE. We got out on this in April. Again, we started ordering fast. So we have enough PPE, roughly, Julie and I did rough numbers, to get us through December if we're using it at a very quick rate. That's masks, because the only PPE we're required to use for everybody right now is masks. That's in the plan. The state is requiring it. We also have other places where we'll be using shields for teachers. Obviously, if we have someone who is symptomatic in an isolation room, then the person working with that person would have gloves, shield, potentially mask. gown. So Julie is working on that, and she can provide some specifics, but the cost associated with this, and we might as well not even wait for the punchline. We submitted our cost last week, $2.5 million.
Oh my God.
That is staffing, both certified and non-certified, more non-certified than anything. In order to get bus monitors, people in classes for those staff members who can't come back to work. We need to have someone monitoring in the classroom while teachers may be teaching remotely. We need to have more monitors on the playgrounds because we can't have kids joined together. They all need to be in separate sections of the playgrounds. Cafeteria, classrooms. Because students won't be able to be congregating together in large groups, we are going to have more staff members. We have done outreach to the community through parents, Facebook, to our staff saying if you have college kids who are home and they're looking for work, we're going to need them. And this is going on all over the state right now. We're not alone. There's also, Julie can tell you what she has had to do to get plexiglass retrofitted to put dividers up between and among people. We are even ordering for student desks where we can't achieve a distance that makes us comfortable. In some places, we're going to have these portable trifold plastic screens for students that go on desks. You've probably seen them on the news or in advertisements in other countries in particular. And as I said, we will be using multiple methods of mitigation depending upon the room, the circumstance, the number of people, the ability to distance. And because of that, you're talking about layers of protection, and each of those layers costs money. Julie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, one more addition.
I don't even know what to add.
Julie was, based on the model, it sounds like you have to hire additional custodians. There's an awful lot of cleaning of playgrounds and bathrooms and all of that.
That is definitely a piece of what we've put in our proposal. I'm meeting with our team of custodians, which, as you know, they are fabulous.
Yeah.
I walked around with them today with Scott Martinson and another member of the health district, and I was so proud. There's no other way to put it. They were so incredible about, how they were setting up the classrooms and how they felt they could clean and when they were going to clean and their schedules. And so, I'm going to sit with them. I do think we're going to need some more hands on deck, Karen, for sure, because it's just more.
It absolutely sounds that way. Yeah.
Jan, would it make sense to do a walkthrough of the plan? I think, clearly we haven't had the opportunity to review it, but I would appreciate a walkthrough of what it contains and what the considerations are.
Jan, it's Eileen Baker. Is Kathy Bai on?
She is. Kathy Bai is on, yes.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah. So Trent is, while Eileen's getting a sip of water, Trent is going to put the actual document up on our screen. So rather than seeing each other, we're going to see the document and we're going to walk through it. That way, if you remember something you had a question about, maybe seeing it will sort of spur you to stop us and just stop us as we're moving through.
Can I ask Kathy Bai a question maybe up front?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. So here's a pretty pointed question about students that have IEPs.
Yeah.
About language pathologists actually needing to be able to wear a mask and a shield and maybe have plexiglass. How that and 6 feet of distancing. It's complicated.
Right.
There's usually not a lot of hall space where you're normally pulling kids out. And so I just wondered, maybe you're going to address it, but it's fairly complicated. And I'm trying to learn more about Old Saybrook, but I'm also looking at it just professionally because it's really, I can't even imagine how that's going to play itself out.
So the good, I don't know if you realize, we have some students in the summer for ESY, a very small group of people, kids who really do distance learning. And we do have a speech pathologist who has been coming in, very limited. Most of it is being distance learning. But there are things like the clear masks. So she doesn't even have that yet. She had purchased one of her own and it got too foggy, so we found one
Right.
that was supposedly better with a spritzer anti-fogger thing. But what she's been doing is she has a face shield and then a plexiglass trifold. And so, you know, her mouth is visible to the student who's on the other side. And if she needs to like touch it, like to show her how to make an F sound, say, she has her gloves on.
Wow.
There's a little thing, you know, so the nice thing about having some ESY is we're learning some of these procedures and what to do.
Students also have to wear masks. That's not enough.
Yes. So in that case, the student does not have their mask on, and that's why she has to have a shield. And then the plexiglass is some extra protection. I know, it's crazy.
And the kids can't really hear very well with the mask anyway, and neither can.
Yeah, you know what? Our kids are doing really well. And these are the kids who can't do any distance learning, and they're loving being in. The staff who's in are loving being in. So, yeah, we're figuring it out. We do a lot of brainstorming amongst directors and stuff on how to handle these.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead. I'm going to talk more about masks a little later on, but I'll walk us through. And again, I'll go fairly high level. Stop me though in every section. So section 4 is where we had to start writing our response. The first few sections in the state plan were just introductory. So we talk about our goals. They match the state's goals, and they're of course safety, robust academics, and making sure that we can flex and mitigate. We know that we can never, ever, unless we're all staying home and never going out anywhere, we can never ensure everyone's perfect safety. We'd have to not go to the grocery store and leave our Amazon boxes out on the front porch for 3 days to do that. But we are doing everything, multiple layers to mitigate risk. I see it. Thanks. Good. So Trent has us, he'll scroll us forward. We will use gloves where appropriate, and where appropriate would mean in a medical situation, in a situation where a staff member has to touch a student, when students are using a piece of equipment that may need to be shared. We're going to, wherever possible, we're providing kits for students of supplies, and in art places using art, we will try not to reuse things, but sometimes we'll have to. Those things will be cleaned, and students may be given gloves to work in those situations. We have been putting in hand sanitizers everywhere. We have sinks in many classrooms, and we have many places where students will be able to have a bathroom assigned to their classroom. That's certainly true at Goodwin. And in other places, we're going to have multiple cleaning events during the day. So we have we had to promise to send in all 3 of our plans, and we did, and we will. We had to promise that we will honor and make sure that we are honoring IEPs, 504 plans, and working with our EL students to make sure that any additional concerns are mitigated there. And then we move forward to page 3, top of page 3, plans for parents and students who may temporarily choose not to participate in the return to school. It is important to us that students who are not returning to school temporarily are assigned to the teacher or teachers with whom they will work when they do return to school. Because it could be a situation such as this: a child gets ill. It may be COVID related, it may not be COVID related, but the child won't come to school for a period of time. We don't want that child removed from his or her classroom. We want her or him to continue with the teacher they know. Or if they don't come into school in September, but in October they decide that they're ready to come back to school, we want them to have had a relationship with that teacher already. We think that these transitions and interruptions have been had enough of an impact on students. So that's important, and that's something we are discussing with the teachers and the teachers union now, how to make that work. We also have a plan for making sure that students who receive free and reduced lunch can get their free and reduced lunch even if they aren't coming into school. And we have a food program plan almost completely in place for those students who are in school. And it's a combination of grab and go, pre-packaged foods, foods delivered to classrooms, foods served in the cafeteria. And one of the things that I was talking about with Trent just recently is we were very close to having an app for our students just before school closed down. And that might be something we want to get up and going again, because that would allow students to pre-order food at some of our schools and then just pick it up with their name on it already sealed in the cafeteria. Probably just as safe as takeout from a restaurant, if not more so. School liaisons, communication plans, and data collection. So the state wants us to be sure that we are communicating with our communities. And I think you know that we are through Facebook, Twitter, school messenger phone calls, school messenger messages. And we've been doing a weekly email with the exception of about not even quite a 2-week hiatus at the beginning of July. Since we closed down in March, and have not missed a week. And we will continue to do that. And actually, it'll probably grow. We also just sent out our first video, a very high-tech video on hand washing, starring Karen Vanderhorst and Principal Sutman. And we now have one on hand sanitizing and mask wearing. And we will continue to do videos, including when you come to Goodwin School as a student, here's how you're going to walk in. Here's where you're going to go. Here's what we're going to look like. Someone suggested that we try to get photos of teachers with and without their masks and send them home to students so that students feel like they know who's behind that mask, even though we can't take it off very much. So that's that next section on page 3 about what we have done and will continue to do to communicate with all of the stakeholders. Number 5, which begins on the top of page 5, is the operations plan. And the state was very prescriptive here. Obviously, this is a place where we have the ability to control and to mitigate the impact of a virus. Since we can't control the virus itself, what can we do? And so the term cohorting is being used more than I ever thought I'd use a word that my computer doesn't even recognize as a word. And that really is just, there is no obligation to cohort. It's strongly advised by the state. And it becomes more and more obvious to me why that's necessary. If you cohort, then obviously you're exposing people to fewer other people, fewer opportunities for them to be exposed to the virus. And so there'll be a lot less movement in our schools this coming year than there has been in the past. The high school is much harder to cohort, and we are still working on what can be done. But even the state recognizes that and says highly recommended for K through 8 and recommended at the high school level. We continue to talk with our partners across the region about how to improve that. Each of the live links that you see in this, these will all be available on the website on Friday so that anybody from our community, actually anybody who can get to our website, can click on all of these links, and they are specific to schools as to how we're going to do classroom setups. And currently we're moving furniture out of rooms. We're rearranging furniture. Sometimes we're substituting one type of furniture for another. We're doing our best to create distance. There is no 6-foot rule in the plan. There's no 6-foot rule in the guidance. There's the only language they talk about. They say maximum distancing possible. And I think that's because they recognize that each school is built differently and is filled differently. Some schools have a small enrollment. Some school districts have a very large enrollment. But we, of course, are doing our very best to maximize distance between and among students and staff. And we're also very fortunate that we have beautiful grounds at each of our schools, and we will be able to use the outside, at least during nice weather. And so Mrs. Pendleton is looking at the purchase of tents and tables and umbrellas and places for staff and to safely be outside. And that's, again, why you need to have emergency management involved. Signage will be everywhere. That's another considerable cost and planning feat, because we have to figure out what makes sense in signage, where to put it. In some cases, we want to put the signage right on the floor, like your 6 feet markers that you're used to seeing at the grocery store. Sometimes it's on the walls and it's talking about traffic, because some hallways will now become one-way hallways. Sometimes it's on desks. Don't sit at this desk. You can sit at this desk to maximize distancing. So principals are going around buildings and identifying where we need signs, what they need to say, what type of signs they need to be, and then Mrs. Pendleton is ordering them. Tonight's in tonight's conversation about calendar, we are going to be asking you to look at moving a professional development day to the start of the school year for making a total of 3 for teachers. And that is because there is so much training that we need to do with them on the simple things, because then we're going to rely on them, the teachers and the paraeducators, to be working with the kids and reminding them how to do that. So something as simple as we're asking all students and staff as they come through the door in the morning to either use hand sanitizer or wash their hands, so that we start the day from that baseline. And so teachers need to be taught how to do that so that kids can be taught how to do that. And there are specific ways that are considered best practice. And that's just simple. Then it's mask wearing, mask donning, mask doffing, reminders about not touching hands to face and distancing. I'm gonna finish this section. Then Mrs. Pendleton, I'm gonna ask you if you don't mind jumping in to see if there's anything that I missed. Julie has created and documented the cleaning and hygiene protocols in that, and you see our little initials there, CRCGOS. I probably should have said this earlier. That means that's either a Connecticut requirement, a Connecticut guideline, so they didn't say you have to do it, but they recommend it, or an Old Saybrook response or an Old Saybrook concern. In some cases, we elevated the requirements of the state because we felt there were things we wanted to do ourselves. And obviously, we're back checking everything to the CDC. And we're also in communication with the district's medical advisor and CRAD, as I said. Cleaning protocols. Julie, do you mind jumping in here and talking a little bit about the protocols and the training that you're doing with custodians?
Sure. So we've established some protocols that include multiple trips and times per day of the high touch areas. So custodians will be concentrating, and this is where we may, in fact, need additional bodies during the day. Right now, we have one custodian on up until about noontime, and then when the lunch waves start, a second person comes in and kind of splits their shift between the day shift and the evening shift. So we have, we have, hopefully the foggers will be in, I should call them sprayers because they're not truly foggers, the spray disinfectant apparatus that we ordered. We have one right now, we've ordered 5 more. They're on back order. As you can imagine, everybody wants them, but we ordered them in March. So we hope to have at least a few more of those. Sinks, handles, high touch areas, door handles, bathrooms will be multiple times a day after different waves. So the custodians and I, in fact, we're meeting again tomorrow to just go through the kinds of things that will have to happen on a routine basis. They have to make sure that they use proper ventilation. We'll have our HVAC systems. They're all being evaluated and adjusted right now. They're opening up as much fresh air intake as they can. We can't use any fans of any kind other than the exhaust fans built into our HVAC systems. No box fans exhausted in the windows are fine. No oscillating fans in the classrooms. So light switches, telephones, all of those high touch areas. Drinking fountains will be shut off. We're getting some free, Maureen Nuzzo got some free bottle fillers from one of our suppliers. We're going to provide it's a reusable bottle of water for every student to start the year, and there'll be at least 1 or 2 bottle fillers in all of the buildings, more at the high school and middle school than at Goodwin, of course. So it's just multiple kinds of mitigation to not have students touch handles and things like that. Doors will be propped open, but the custodians have a soup to nuts protocol for bathrooms and then for the classrooms as well.
Thank you. The next section is all about classroom layout, and I'm going to speed through that a little bit. The principals did amazing work here. They walked through with Mrs. Pendleton, custodians and teachers, and they identified things that needed to be changed about classrooms in each building, how to make the room still hospitable for students. So purchasing of yoga mats and being able to say things to students like you need to sit 2 yoga mats away from each other so that they understand distancing, but still can spread out a little bit. I think it's unfair to ask young children to sit in seats all day long, especially because we're going to minimize their movement into the hallways and in with other groups. And so we're doing things that will allow them to still feel like kids in a more constrained setting. Water bottles, wash stations, desks, chairs, maximizing distance, remembering as they create schedules to look at classroom load, and trying very hard to mitigate, to make sure we keep appropriate distance. When teachers teach, and I want to talk about this right now, there's a lot of talk about masks. I've had more comments in surveys about masks. I've had more people ask about masks, and there's very strong feelings about masks. There are some people who are saying they do not want to send their young children to school if they're required to wear a mask all day. They are required to wear a mask all day. We've even purchased small pediatric masks for little children. We intend to create mask break opportunities. I can't tell you what that's going to look like right now. We need to involve our teachers in that discussion. It certainly, as I said, will probably mean going outside at times. Goodwin, we're kind of fortunate in this situation that we have doors that we can go right outside from classrooms to designated areas on the playground, ask kids to distance and take off masks. We're going to have students who are going to struggle with this, and we're going to have to find ways to give them breaks during the day. And staff members are going to need breaks. Also in the plan, in the guidance from the state, it says that staff members may take their masks off and teach from a farther distance in the classroom. So there may be something that they need to do. I'm assuming, what if we're talking about a world language teacher who needs to have children see how she's forming the words, or they're at an appropriately large enough distance that not wearing a mask for a period of time would be acceptable. That's in the state guidelines. And I could see us using that as an opportunity to teach at times. So what those mask breaks will look like are going to look different depending upon the age of the children, the school, and we're going to be looking for our teachers to help us determine how does that work in everybody's room.
Dan, quick question.
Sure.
I keep bringing this up, and I know that it's not something we can address, but I am very concerned about the air quality in the classrooms with the heat and humidity, with no air conditioning and now no oscillating fans, and little kids having to wear masks. I just, again, I understand there's nothing we can do about that at this point, but I think it's going to be a concern. And
yeah, I agree.
Really worried about that.
I agree. So we're issuing these FDA-approved surgical masks. They are right now. I'm wearing an N95. It's one that I've been reusing for a while, but they're definitely heavier than those surgical masks. The surgical masks still pass the blow out a candle test. If you can blow out a candle through your mask, then it's probably not safe, according to Bill Nye the Science Guy, which was one of my entertainments one afternoon. I was trying to find good advice on how to do the masks. But yeah, that's a problem. That is a concern, and we are concerned about it. So that's why we're spending the money on the tents and the outside areas to move people through areas safely. We also are going to be asking the board to consider giving us half days for the entire first week, which I know you saw in your board packet already. That'll help the kids get used to masks. It'll send them home on those hot first days, potentially hot first days, and give teachers a little extra professional development time. I'm hoping that will help ease us into it. But we're just going to have to be really understanding about, kids are just saying, I've had enough of the mask right now. And a teacher can just say, let's just pick up and go outside and let's just go for a walk, and we can still do learning while we're doing that. So that's I'm hoping, and I'm hoping that the summer will be short-lived, but we are mitigating by creating outside spaces.
Okay.
There are maps associated with them. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, there are recess maps, so we know where classes are going, which part of the playgrounds they'll be using. That's even true up at the high school. What's assigned to PE classes? What's assigned to classroom mask breaks and other locations? And that goes on for a few pages. And then there's a section on page 9 about what we're going to do before the opening days of class as we prepare. each of the buildings. And you'll find that some of this is repetitive. We did that for a number of reasons. We assume that the public is going to use this document. They're just going to skim through and look for what they're looking for. So we put items in multiple places. We thought that even the state might do that. They might look over this plan and say, let's just see how Old Saybrook is handling such and such. And they'd be able to find it in multiple places. So this is somewhat repetitive, this section, but it breaks down a little bit more all of the steps that are taking place to deep clean our facilities, to prepare our furniture, our floors, our walls, and everything the equipment that students will be using. The next section's on signs, and as I said, they're going to be everywhere. Ubiquitous signs. We're going to stick to a lot of CDC. If you got a chance to see the first video today on hand washing, you'll see I held up 2 signs. Those are CDC signs specifically for smaller children. So we will have developmentally appropriate signs everywhere. They will either be created by the CDC or created by us based on CDC guidelines or local health district guidelines. We are doing none of the medical stuff without medical people. We know to stay in our lane. And so we're getting their advice every step of the way. The next section is all about cohorting, groups, teams, and how students will get on and off buses, enter the building, where they will enter the building so that they're not going into large crowds of students. How they will be grouped in their classroom, how they will be grouped for lunch and recess, and then how they leave at the end of the day or go to their after-school care provider at the end of the day. So that, again, throughout the day, we are limiting cohorts. We also, and this is particularly important at the high school because the cohorting isn't as clean at the high school for obvious reasons, the way we put students in classes. We don't really do it by grade at the high school. And while we're working on a mitigation plan with our colleagues across the region on how that might be done a little bit better, we will have to be doing contact tracing lists all the time. So people going in and out of rooms will need to identify that they have been somewhere so that, God forbid, we should have a presumptive or positive case. We know everybody who had been in that room for any length of time. And just today, talking on the phone with the Regional Area Health District, they said you're looking for people who have been in the person's presence 2 days prior to showing symptoms for, more than just a few minutes. It wasn't just a casual 10 minutes. It was there in the room because there's a lot of evidence apparently now. Again, I'm not a medical person, but apparently there's a lot of evidence that the longer you're exposed to this illness, the more likely you are to get it. So these are our cohorting concepts. They are somewhat, although the principals work together quite a bit, they are also specialized for the building themselves. There are traffic pattern maps. As I said, some of our halls have been, our thinner halls, our more narrow halls have been turned into one-way hallways. Some of our stairwells at the high school are one-way stairwells because there's no divider. There's no way to keep students separate. In a place that is a two-way hallway or is a two-way stairwell, it'll say keep to the right, hang on to the wall, stay away from the middle portion. And obviously this means a lot of monitoring by adults. Again, a cost associated with that because that requires hiring. The next section is again on all broken down on foot traffic, hallways, and shared spaces. I'm happy to go through any one of those. Again, they're repetitive. Many of them look the same, though they're slightly different too because of the buildings in which they're housed and the age of the children.
Sorry, Jan, I just have a quick question about traffic flow in the high school, where one of the stairwells might be one direction and the other stairwell on the other side of the school would be a different direction. You guys have thought of so much. You've probably thought of this already, but with respect to time in between classes and being able to get to classes, if you have to go down one stairwell that's at the complete opposite end of the school, is that a concern at all?
Yes, it is.
I mean,
yes, it is. Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because it allows me to say that the high school is going to a modified AB block. So they will only have 4 classes a day, which means only 4 transitions a day. That, again, keeps people isolated. And then those are now going to be 90-minute classes, which means I'm sure we'll be able to shave time and add some time to passing periods if we need to. And it's really just the stairwells in the back by the science wing. And its counterpart on the other side, science, and those have been changed to one way. The stairwells in the front of the building are very, very wide, and there is a railing down the middle, which serves as a nice barrier. And so those will be 2-way stairwells at this time. Again, this is still in the hands of the health area of the CRAD, and they may ask us to make changes to any part of this. We did ask the question on page 13. We talk about before and after child care programs, and we do have some folks in our community, according to the survey, who tend to take advantage of before and after school care. So fortunately, I've been on a town-wide committee, and we've involved some of our local care providers and getting a sense of, so Youth and Family is on it. There's someone on it from one of our preschools. And so they've been giving really good advice and offering some support. So of the folks who are planning to use, have to get to the right, before school care, it's a total of 52 who identified that they would need that. And after school care was a total of 69 parents who identified they'd need that. That may happen in a couple of ways. Traditionally, we've had an agency they've worked right out of our school. They're still willing to do that, and they're willing to follow our cleaning protocols when they're done using the facility, both morning and afternoon. We have another group that said, if you can get a bus to our place, you can have parents drop their children off here in the morning, and whether they use our before care program or not, they can get on that bus and get to school. And then that way they stay with the same bus cohort and they come back to that same place in the afternoon. Because that's really important in this plan, that the bus cohort is a cohort. And again, when you're thinking about contact tracing, you have to think about how many people has a person been exposed to in a given day. So limiting the number of cohorts that they're involved with is really important. Any bus the student takes in the morning, that's the bus that student is assigned to, that stop, that bus, and that child has to go on that bus or be driven in or picked up by a parent or guardian all the time. We can't allow students to be taking different buses, going home with friends, going to a different home. That just won't work. That just busts up our cohorts way too much. And that was also required by the state. So we're considering, and we're still talking with our friends in the community about how best to utilize their services to meet family needs. Because again, this is partly about getting people back to work too. It's safety of children and staff. It's academics. And then thirdly, it's getting families feeling more normal again at a time when, according to our health experts, the health data says that we can do that. You know, obviously, and I say it's repeated in this plan many, many times, all of this is subject to change, and it may change very quickly based on how data demonstrates whether or not the illness is spiking. Next section is all about bathroom protocols. Very different in each building, obviously. Different ages, different buildings. Goodwin's so easy. There's a bathroom for every classroom. So nice and easy to keep clean, easy for the teacher to know there's a child there already, and so everyone else has to wait. So we don't have to worry about lines and 6-foot distancing, and that's terrific for our little ones. At the middle school, they're going to be able to assign a bathroom to a grade level. They're also going to be able to assign entrances and exits to those grade levels. So there's no reason for them to come off the team during the day. Bathrooms will be cleaned multiple times during the day. And we just heard yesterday, and so this was changed. It's in our current plan. It wasn't in the first version you received on page 15. They want a limit of 2 people maximum in a bathroom. And so it's sort of an every other stall and no congregating around the sinks for obvious reasons. And if you saw our hand washing video today, Karen Vanderhorst, our nursing director, walked Mr. Sutman through how exactly to wash his hands safely using a towel to turn faucets on and off. And we will be practicing this with students, and we're asking parents to practice it with children at home. In the high school, of course, they're just going to use some single stall bathrooms and then limit the access to no more than 2 every other stall in the other bathrooms. Some bathrooms will be closed throughout the day, and they will change and modify that based on student needs. Some of this is going to change just as soon as we open and we realize that's not going to work. Look at how the kids are using it. We need to flex and change that. Goodwin, in the next section, each school talks about the outside of its school, how they're going to use fields, playground equipment, how it will be cleaned, how students will be assigned to areas. And that's true for all 3 schools. And as you might imagine, if you had a chance to look at the maps, they're very, very different. Again, we'll be using tents outside as for shading area and also a nice playground area. Food services, again, I'm going to ask Julie if you would take us through, right, I'm on that one next, child nutrition.
Sure. So that was one of the meetings and topics today with the Connecticut River Area Health District, and the Goodwin School and the middle school have a better arrangement, if you will, on once again on getting kids into the cafeteria by cohorts. Right now, it looks like they'll eat by grade. There's a method for them to enter the areas single classrooms at a time. That classroom gets seated, the next one comes in, they're seated, and so forth. The cohorts are about 14 feet apart from each other. They're seated single-sidedly on each table, and we believe we can get the grade levels in pre-K. Well, pre-K will eat in the classroom, but kindergarten through 8th grade will all be able to eat, as a grade level spread out. We will use the fitness room or the multipurpose room next to the middle school as a way to spread those students out even more. And each of the schools are going to have a tent. So we're going to take advantage of, maybe one class per day gets the outside dining instead of the inside dining. The Connecticut River Health District Scott Johnson loved those plans. He thought those were going to work really, really well. How kids were going to come in at the middle school was they would pick up their lunch and then go be seated, and they would actually take their own lunch. At the elementary level, we would have the lunches all composite presented, and they would be delivered out to the tables by one of the food service people. We know who orders lunch at Goodwin. It's a little bit different method, and then those would be delivered to the table. We are going to simplify the menu for obvious reasons. We'll keep it with probably a couple of choices, at least for the start of school, to make that as easy as possible. And then if need be, there'll be the ability to have a classroom, stay in a classroom and eat their lunch inside the classroom as well. So we're going to have to, as Jan said, this whole process, going to kind of have to feel it out the first few days, figure out what makes sense, what works. We'll modify it as needed. If we think having all of them together is too much, we'll again rotate that through. They seem very comfortable with that arrangement. It's at the high school, and it's a much more difficult scenario. So what was discussed today was that they would come through in some sort of cohorting manner. So the high school was working on whether that would be certain classrooms come through at a time, and then the next wave, they're looking at 3 waves there, and they would have them come through in waves, grab their, and more than likely, the majority would go back and eat in the classrooms there. So that one's still a little fluid. They're still trying to figure out with the schedule how that would work and how that'll all, be able to be pulled together by, cohorting and keeping kids as safe as possible. Again, they will also have some outside dining. So we can keep probably about 75 students at a time. It's not quite the largest number for the grade levels. I think 100, Jan, 102 at the high school maybe is the largest. So
yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, a little bit larger than that. Yep.
Okay. So that was middle school, I think, 102.
Yes.
So again, some fluid plans, kind of figuring out where kids can go, the designated eating areas. Classrooms are definitely in the mix, I think, at the high school level as well. So more to come on that, but
Yeah.
we're in the process of trying to work through all the details.
Thanks, Julie. What makes Julie and Maureen's work a little bit difficult there, and they're working directly with the principals, is obviously when you're eating, you can't be wearing a mask. So we have to increase the distance between and among students at that time. So we
Right.
have to do a combination of eating in cafeterias and eating in other places so that we're not feeding students all day long. So no one wants to eat lunch at 9 a.m. So, well, I do, but most people don't. So,
And forward facing, they can't
They all
be
have to be
facing each
facing one
other. That's the
direction,
other
so-
big thing, which really cuts down the seating
right.
capacity.
So all of that is being worked out. And while we have a firm plan right now that has been reviewed by the Connecticut River Area Health District, we know that we will continue to modify that plan. And the kids will probably give us feedback about what does and doesn't work once they get in there. Transportation is the next section, top of 17. And so the state says that we are expected, that they assume that we will be planning to operate at full capacity on buses or close to it under the current situation, but that we need to be ready to dial it back at any time. This is tricky. So this is why we want to hire bus monitors, at least for the first month. I think that I'm thinking of being a parent, and I'm about to put my small child on a bus for the first time since March or maybe ever. And the bus driver opens up the door, and I need someone there to greet me as a mom and say, "Hi, I'm from the school district and I'm wearing my mask. And it's so good to see your child wearing his or her mask," or "Here's a mask for him or her." Because we are going to, once kids get to school, make sure that they're all wearing FDA approved masks, and we're providing those. So that just makes everybody feel more comfortable. It allows the monitor to work with the students on the bus and get them used to the routine of where they're sitting, how they're getting on the bus, and how they're getting off the bus, because we don't want students passing each other on the bus. We want the students who get on first to go to the back, and we want the students who get off first be from the front of the bus. At the end of the day, we're going to put them on the bus in reverse order, which is why it's so important that your bus cohorts are the same, that everybody's getting on and off at the same places, or the parents are picking them up, which is entirely up to the parents.
Jan, I have a question.
Yep.
So typically, especially with the little kids, the younger ones always sit in the front of behind the bus driver, and then it goes back from there. So if that's not able to happen now, it sounds like we'll have, the monitor will be able to, because that offered a lot of comfort to especially the parents of younger kids. So they're not mixing with the older kids in the school. So it's my understanding that every bus will have a monitor
Yes.
to and from school, and they will be able, even if those little ones have to sit in the back of the bus, it'll be controlled. It'll be
right. Yeah.
It won't be crazy, because
when we
kids are
train
crazy on those buses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we train our monitors, we will train them in that too. How long we
Okay.
keep the monitors on the bus? Right now, we've just asked them to be available from. We'll see how that goes. We may change our minds. And as of right now, 62% of our pre-K through 8 parents say they're not going to use the bus, and 73% of our 9 through 12 parents. So while we're saying we'll be at full capacity, I really don't think we'll be anywhere close to full capacity.
Okay. All right.
That is spelled out for low, moderate, and low and moderate transmission. How we're going to board our buses, how we're going to use our buses. It's all spelled out. Obviously, in a high transmission, we're not even going to be using buses. And the arrival and drop off is described at each building. Again, that's just physicality. That's just where kids get off, what door they go through, and all of that will be prescribed. So it won't be that big mass drop off that you see at the middle school and kids all bunching together. It's going to be, you're in 5th grade, you just got off the bus, you walk around to the door over there. You're in 6th grade, you walk around to the door over there. We wanted to move our 5th graders into the 6th grade hall this year. We were going to begin that structure of the lower and the upper middle schools, and we cannot do that and still keep our cohorts separate. So sadly, as I said to you in a letter at one point this summer, that's sort of been our first deferral because of this situation. Unless you have specific questions on the drop off, and you can look at those maps on the traffic flow, I'll go to health practices and protocols.
Dan, I just have a question. It's Eileen.
Yeah. Yes.
So the first bus to go out will be going from which school to which school? Because do we normally use the same buses because students get dropped off at different times?
Mrs. Pendleton?
So that
Yes.
they're cleaned in between, drop-offs.
Yep. So I did have a conversation with the bus company. I think it was maybe yesterday. It might have been last Friday. I can't remember. The days all seem like they're running together. And so one of the things that we discussed was, they would have cleaning supplies on the bus, and in between their run, the manager of the bus company thought it was certainly doable to have them, grab their little spray bottle, take their paper towel, go down and hit all the high touch areas, going down the aisle of the buses, the top, the handles, the railing going down the stairway and so forth. So they were, at first blush, they are willing to do that little bit of cleaning in between.
You must have to.
Yes.
Thanks.
The next section, Karen Vanderhorst led a team that included our medical advisor and others, nurses and others, about best practices here on health practices and protocols. Obviously, the goals are the layers of mitigation are social distancing, hand washing, face coverings, respiratory and cough etiquette, enhanced cleaning, disinfecting of services, and constantly educating all of us, staff, students, everybody, on how to keep each other and ourselves safe. She also has the added worry of having to deal with physical immunizations, because we still have to get students their physicals in order for them, by state law, in order for them to move forward. So those have been sort of held at bay for a while, and now we're going to be working with parents to make sure that those get done. Also, immunizations. I know there's a huge push right now to start talking about the influenza vaccine. I think there's real fear amongst the medical community that if we have a flu outbreak, that will only tax our medical system even more. And so they are hoping there's even some talk today about how they could use our outsides of our facilities at some point this fall, earlier rather than later, to do drive-by immunizations, mass immunizations of flu. So that we can mitigate the impact that would have, along with any potential resurgence of coronavirus.
So Jan, I have a question. There's a last bullet up there, and it says, education will occur prior to and on the first day of school, as well as refreshers during the year as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably a question regarding instruction. Normally, and if it wasn't a COVID, you have teachers working with students side by side. So pretty much my question is, how do you have effective teaching and learning when you really are teaching at a distance, whether you're in the classroom? Remote, I can understand because I've done it and you can really get some one-on-one individualization. But in a classroom, they're advising teachers not to go near students because it's not the distancing and it's not effective. So I have a question about how instruction is going to be delivered and how teachers feel about it.
And if you don't mind, Eileen, I'm going to defer your question, and then I'm going to have Mrs. Goss help me answer it when we get to the academic and instruction section.
All right, great.
All right,
thanks.
we'll come back to that.
Jan, I have a health related question.
Okay.
It's regarding the face masks. Will students be required to wear the face masks that are issued by the school, or could they come in with their own face masks?
At this time, we're going to require that students wear the face mask issued by the school. We had a great conversation today about the logistics of that. We were told by the health authority that we want to issue brown bags to students so that face masks can be reused. Again, depending upon the age of the student, we'll see how long they last. But and we don't expect them to last weeks and weeks. But certainly a mask could be used for multiple days. And their recommendation is the good old-fashioned brown lunch bag, that students be instructed to take their face mask and put it in a brown lunch bag, which we can give them. We figured the little ones might have fun coloring and drawing on their brown lunch bags and making it personalized, making it their own. And then storing them like that over the night and then putting them back on when they're getting on the bus in the morning. Obviously, we're going to have students forget their masks. Their masks are going to get dirty. Their masks are going to get old. They're going to get torn. We're going to be replacing them. And we will do that as long as face masks are available to us. Remember, back in the spring, we had a shortage across the nation, and I'm hoping that we're not there again. And our reason for not allowing people to bring in their own masks, that includes me and the custodians and the teachers and the kids, is because that would then require us every day trying to determine whose mask is sufficient and whose mask is not keeping us from exposure. I've seen statistics as low as only 16% of virus and germ being contained by certain masks. And again, I know I was being silly earlier, but that really great YouTube video actually was TikTok at first of Bill Nye showing the difference amongst the different types of masks was very convincing. And it was very simple, and kids really appreciate the message in it. So we're going to issue them. And we're going to ask people to wear them.
So Jan?
Yes.
So will you be, so on the first day of school, kids getting on the bus, will
Yep.
bus drivers be providing the masks, or are parents going to have them beforehand? How is that logistically going to work?
We haven't fully decided yet. I'm thinking the easiest thing would be to ask the monitors to give out masks.
Okay.
And perhaps it'll be, well, maybe we'll wait until they're getting off. As long as they have a mask when they're getting off, we'll get them their mask. We haven't figured that out yet. It's one of the many details we're still putting in place.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. On page 22, continues to talk about how to deal with reporting illnesses, and we have some new guidance on this. In the past, if you had a staff member who called up and said, "I'm out," you pretty much said, "Okay, thank you for letting me know." Now we are being told that we can and should ask for specifics, and so we will ask what we call COVID-related type questions. Do you have a fever, aches and chills, body aches, anything, a cough? So that anything that could be COVID-like, the nurses are documenting, and this is for staff and students, they're documenting it. When they think that they have a spike or perhaps an outbreak of either flu or COVID, these statistics are going to get reported to the health district. As a matter of fact, I just had a little email conversation either earlier today or last night with Karen Vanderhorst and with our data specialist, Jeff Chong, and they're creating codes for certain symptoms that will only be available to the nurse. We will not be collecting and sharing this information. It'll be available to the nurse. They will be monitoring it daily. It'll be downloaded into Excel spreadsheets and then disaggregated with identifiable information removed, will be shared with the health authority. And if they say to us at some point, we're starting to be concerned here, then we know we've got to move into a different phase of our plan. And I'm very excited about that. And again, I have to really say that this has created an opportunity for us to get to know our colleagues at the health authority very well, and they're very engaged and involved in what we're doing. So the rest of this is all about the isolation rooms, the collecting of health information, the fact that we are going to ask parents to every day do their own health check of their children before they send them to school. I know I've been a working mom myself, and there have been some days where you look at your child and say, oh, I don't know, should I send them or not send them? And you think about all the many things that you have to change in your day, and you make a decision to send your child to school. We're going to ask parents, let's rethink that. let's consider whether or not your child has a fever, and it says specifically here 100 degrees or more. That number just changed recently. It used to be 100.3. Now it's down to 100. Then the child should stay home. And we're going to be asking parents to do that assessment on a daily basis. The only way this will be successful is if we all take responsibility, students, parents, staff, to really make this work. So we'll be sending those instructions home. That may be through a video, through email. We're going to have some live meetings. We actually have a meeting scheduled for Friday with parents. And that one is just on face masks, gloves, transportation, and I forgot, hand washing, hand sanitizing, and just how we're going to make that happen. And we're going to continue to have those to help parents get ready for this. The symptoms for COVID-19, that's a link there to CDC. That will be shared with families, with staff, and repeatedly shared. School-wide sick protocols, including signs, will be in place everywhere. And again, that's our nursing director and our medical advisor working on that. And then I will be notified if we believe we have a case, a presumed case, or we have a case. I will be notified. We will be working immediately with emergency management and with the health district. So it is going to be constant monitoring. And as you might imagine, that's also going to require some additional staff. And so we have an LPN in our request. It's needed, particularly at Goodwin, where we have other issues that we need to address with little ones on a regular basis. And that's going to be integral to this being successful.
So Jan, so play that out. Let's say a staff member or a student is actually diagnosed with COVID. They've been in school, symptoms are showing up, they're diagnosed of having it. What's the protocol? So we're hearing 14-day quarantine. What is the health district saying? How do we manage that?
That's going to be, that's going to change between now and September. So I'm almost loath to say it, but I can tell you as of today, that if, let's just say we're an office building, let's not even talk about students. Today, if I were diagnosed with COVID and they would ask me for a contact tracing for the 2 days prior to my showing symptoms. So everybody I came in contact with more than just passed by for 2 days. And they would be, the employer at that point would have to say to them, you all need to go home for 14 days.
Right.
The person who is the positive case needs to stay home for 10 days plus 24 hours after not having a fever, as long as the symptoms are reducing. So they may still have a little of this or that, but it's 10 days. And they also have to reach that benchmark of 24 hours without a fever and reduction of symptoms.
Right. So with contact tracing, you've got a classroom of students, you've got a bus full of other students, potentially.
Potentially.
So it could be disastrous, really.
Right.
We won't go there, but yeah.
Right.
That's
but for 1 minute, I don't mind going there, because that's why we're cohorting, so that we won't necessarily, at this point, everything is at this point as of today, we won't necessarily have to close an entire school down. We know that Jan has been in the company of these 20 people, that staff member or those 2 staff members. And those are the people that we will identify first. And again, all of this will be subject to review by the health authority. And if they say, I'm sorry, we're concerned about this and we're closing everything down, then we're closing everything down. And we need to be ready to turn it around.
Yeah, so we'll just transition to virtual learning for that particular cohort of students, that classroom.
Right,
okay.
which is why Mrs. Goss is so preoccupied with making sure we put a robust plan for that together.
Okay, go Amity.
Yeah,
all right,
go
thank
Amity. Social distancing, again, by building. We weren't required to do these by building, but we recognize that, we have 3 buildings. We have 3 very different age groups. And we felt it was important to, and also 3 very different buildings. different ages, different constructs. So we wrote plans about social distancing and maximizing distance between and among people and cohorts for each one. And I'm gonna, if you have any questions, the one thing I want to say is that there'll be repeated education about social distancing. There'll be repeated reminders. We're hoping that the children will pick up, try and remind each other as well. When it comes to teaching, as Mrs. Bai said earlier, Eileen, I'm getting back to your original question. There will not always be, and there's not required to be 6 feet distancing, but remember, we're doing layers of mitigation. So it could be a mask and a shield. It could be no mask because we've got to see a speech therapist's mouth moving, but she'll have a shield and she'll have plexiglass or one of those trifolds in front of her. She may put more distance between her and someone. Someone wearing a mask and a shield can get right up to someone. You know, I'll give you an example. Mrs. Goss and I, or Mr. Gerbers and I, are working on something today, and we needed to be side by side for a while. So obviously, we do our best to keep our distance. We both have our masks on. We don't touch each other's pens or keyboards or phones, but we are still, you know, able to accomplish the work. And material sharing. Oh, I did a nice example of material sharing. We don't want people, we're going to give students K through 8, we're going to give them bins, and we're going to give them supplies to go into the bins. And I think next week, the principals are going to start messaging on what's going to be in those and how that's going to work. And even their computers will be their computers and no one else will use them, which is another reason why we needed to go to a one-to-one. So that not only if we in a distance learning situation, they can take their computers and go home, but also they don't have to touch anybody else's keyboards during the day. They don't need to share any materials there. There will be exceptions, and materials that need to be shared will be employing gloves in some places, and in places like a tech ed classroom, we'll be cleaning between uses, because in tech ed, we don't want to be using gloves. We're using equipment where students need to be able to, it's tactile. They need to be able to feel things, and gloves are not safest. Face coverings. Gosh, that's all I've talked about for days. Page 25. If there's anything more you want me to say on face coverings, I will, but I think we have exhausted it. Bus drivers, bus monitors. We are not allowing visitors into our buildings during the school day at this time. So we won't be able to have guest speakers in. We can put them on a Google Meet and they can speak to students that way, but we're not going to have people coming into our buildings at this time. Even those of us like administrators who work here at central office, we need to be very careful about foot traffic and about extending ourselves into cohorts. Parents who need to come to our buildings, we will give them specific directions about how to come to the building, where to go. We may ask them to go through the same process. They will have to wear a mask. They may be asked to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer, just so that we are protecting the students in the building and the staff in the building. I'm on page 27 now.
Jan?
Yeah.
Question is, Eileen, so if you have a staff member that goes from building to building, and they don't have a home base, how are you working that out?
We're still going to utilize them in that way. We're going to try to minimize it wherever possible. And then we're going to talk to them about an extension of PPE. Like what do we need to do to make sure that they feel comfortable? That's going to happen within buildings too, Eileen. You're going to have specials teachers that may be pushing into a classroom to teach art or world language or music. And so, so we're going to have some of that. We're going to have to include them, obviously, in the contact tracing lists. So for very good reasons, their health and not wanting to have a lot of staff members, you know, and a lot of students interacting, we will be keeping lists of who's going in and trying to keep it to a minimum. Though we can't exclude it altogether.
Has there been conversation about, I heard you talking about mask breaks, but nowhere in a building necessarily, if a teacher is teaching, will they be able to do a mask break unless they go outside?
Yeah, we have not been told that they can't take mask breaks in buildings. Again, it's layers. If you can distance across the room, so neither Trent Gerbers nor I is wearing a mask right now. I think we're probably 20 feet, 25 feet apart. We're able to accomplish that in this room. So if we were a small group of 5 students, that may be possible. But Eileen, I want to get more direction on that. And even the state has said they're going to give us more direction on that. There are a number of areas in this plan where we're still awaiting state advice.
Understand. Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Number 7 under health monitoring is about distribution of information. It's more communication. It's more about documenting sick time. And there's also recommended communication to families should we have a positive case. And so we will have templates that we'll be able to utilize, knowing that we're sharing what we can share without sharing information that's considered protected by FERPA. And that will be a delicate balance. We will not be able to announce and little Jan is sick with COVID. It's not something you can put on a Facebook page. So we would identify what we can identify to the maximum we can identify in accordance with law. The green, yellow, red transmissions on page 28, that's all state language. We just adopted their language for the most part, and then managed it to match us. So we mentioned CRAD here and our local process for coordinating who will be our advisors. And that's just a way of talking about little or no transmission, middle or moderate, and substantial community transmission, and how we're going to respond in each way. Mrs. Vanderhorst and I worked on the containment plan on page 8, and then it was put in front of other folks regarding how we're going to respond to a possible outbreak in our schools or community. And it describes clearly who needs to know, when they need to know. And then it also talks about the emergency team that gets put together at each building to be sure that the right people are aware and are taking the appropriate steps. What is the role of each of these people? I think the meat of this one is there with that paragraph: the building administrator, head custodian, nurse, social worker, guidance counselor, school psychologist will serve as the initial response team if a case or suspicion of a case is reported. And each of them has a specific role, who they communicate with, what their job is to mitigate the impact. And so that there's no guessing should something happen. Everybody knows what their job is and what to do. Again, this is a little bit repetitive from the earlier section. It spells out, what are the symptoms of COVID and what do we expect people to do if they have these symptoms? And the answer is stay home. Yep, this even has the latest CDC guideline on how long people stay out, which I just went over with you. And then the canceling of classes is section 9. I am still involved, and so is Mrs. Pendleton, in biweekly, twice a week, emergency management meetings. I'm involved in regional superintendent meetings. Each of us is involved with our regional counterparts, the principals, Kathy Bai, Julie. We're all meeting regularly with our counterparts to understand what is common thinking, what is best practice, what is rumor out there, because there's so much misinformation. And then how we would go ahead and close down a class or schools. We're required to call the State Department of Education and let them know if we're making that decision and why we're making that decision. And obviously we have done a lot to make sure that we can keep teaching. And that brings us to the next section, which is all on academics and remote learning. And again, I am somewhat involved. I do want to talk about the hybrid model. But I am going to turn this over to Mrs. Goss as soon as I do that. So we're going to use, you can see a link to page 24 of the State Department of Education's decision tree for how to open and close classes. It's at the top of page 32. And then I want to point out the hybrid model and ask Mr. Gerbers to click on it, because I really want to make sure that this is understood. Uh-oh. Okay, So if you at home can click on it while we're waiting for it to come up on our screen. This is something that we worked on as a region. So the same region of superintendents who made the decision to close schools in March worked together. We didn't create this. This was actually created by our colleagues over in the Fairfield County area. And not everyone is able to use this model, and not everyone needs to use this model. We have a couple of districts that are so small that this isn't really necessary for them. But this hybrid model would allow us to cohort students in a way that will maximize mitigation and maximize safety, still allow for a robust academic, as robust as possible academic programming, and allows parents to have some sense of how to make their life orderly and organized in the land of complete chaos. So the cohorts, if you can see it, is there would be an A cohort that would come into school on Mondays and Tuesdays, and a B cohort that would come into school on Thursdays and Fridays. On Wednesday, everyone would be on distance learning. The safety feature here is that every cohort has 5 days until they're back in the building. So there's a significant amount of time that passes. Symptoms may show up then if there are any. They're removed from each other for that period of time. The other safety feature is the buildings are available for deep cleanings on Wednesdays and then on the weekends. So between cohort A and cohort B, you have a deep cleaning day. The academic piece here is teachers have the opportunity to see in person all of their students every week. So they see them for 2 days every week. On Wednesday, we could even give teachers the option if they wanted to lock themselves in their classroom and work from there, as long as they know they've got to get out when it's cleaning time. You know, we could do something along those lines. The third thing is if we do this by first letter of last name, then that means that, and we all do that across the region, then you have some order where, we have some things that are working together. That it makes sense for families that live and work in different places. We would, of course, have to make exceptions for families with children who have multiple last names, and we could do that relatively easily. And it's just a nice, easy way to divide. It also allows mom, dad, or whomever to go into work a certain number of days a week, and they know that those days would always be Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, and not have to worry about childcare. So of all the hybrids that we looked at, alternating day, half a day, alternating week, this is the one that got the closest to meeting our goals of mitigating and safety, academic robustness and connection, and trying to put some order in parents' lives. If we did a half day, then you have parents who can never go into the office, and you also have no time between cohorts. You have cohorts who you have no way of cleaning between cohorts. If we did every other week, teachers go an entire week and sometimes longer with holidays without seeing a group of students. So in all the models that we looked at, and I think we looked at every possible situation, this is the one that made the most sense. It's not perfect. There's nothing about this that's perfect. But it makes the most sense for trying to meet those 3 goals in that order.
Jan, quick question. What triggers this to be implemented? A case, or this is if there's a breakout?
It could be any local, regional, state, or national changes in data. So this could be even implemented for a school if there's a reason to. I doubt that would happen, but it could be anything at all. It could be our decision here with our health department, or it could be the state telling us to do this. What we can't do is open up this way. They want us to open up 5 days a week for everybody. But this may be a possibility. I will say, because I know someone will hear about it, that there are some districts that are going to open up this way for a few days, but those are districts that have 185 or 186 school days. So they know the state won't count those as school days, and that doesn't impact their need to meet the requirement, the minimum requirement of days. Any questions on the hybrid model before I ask Mrs. Goss to take over the work that is being done on the distance learning process?
Jan?
Yes.
Will you have an opportunity to request distance learning versus coming into the classroom?
So we'll follow all federal and state laws on that subject, Eileen, and they're on page section 13 of this plan. It talks about all the federal and state opportunities available to employees, not just teachers in all cases, but to employees that is available to them. It includes ADA, FML coronavirus version, family care. There's the original 80 hours law. So there's a lot of law and regulation surrounding that question. Unfortunately, I have the board's attorney who gave me a nice little primer on all of that.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mrs. Goss, can you take over?
I can. I first want to say that the reason that we have such a really robust hybrid plan ready to go and remote plan ready to go, or very close to it, is because of the instructional leadership team. They have been amazing. They are all teachers and they don't get paid to work in the summer. And I have conversations with members of ILT, multiple members of ILT every single day. So please know all the work that they're doing and know that they're not being paid to do any of that work. They're doing it because they believe in doing this right and doing it for our students. We sat down, oh gosh, it probably was April when we started to talk about what our plans for the future needed to look like. And we recognized by about May that we would need these 3 levels. But as someone had pointed out in many of the meetings that we've been in, unless we are completely remote, we're always essentially in some form of a hybrid. And that's because parents can opt to keep their children home. And so we always need to be educating those children. So we sort of set out with a couple of goals, which is that all kids would receive equitable education, whether they were at home or in our classrooms, and that we were going to try very hard to make it as reasonable as possible to do the teaching on the other side of that. So we thought about what those models could look like and realized that really we needed to start with remote and get a really solid remote plan in place, and that any in-person time that we could get backing off of that was going to be really beneficial for kids and exciting for us. But if we start with remote, then we can always kind of add to that model. And so we will start in Google Classrooms. Every child will, be in a Google Classroom or many Google Classrooms. And that's how, Eileen, we're going to get to do some of the things that you're talking about. You can't get next to a kiddo to confer about their writing piece. You can do this and be face-to-face with them and, be looking at their writing on the screen at the same time. So we may physically be in the room with a child, but we may be conferring computer to computer instead of face-to-face. So it's different. It's something to get used to, but it doesn't mean that the instructional quality has to drop at all. It just means that we have to accomplish it in a different way. And we can do guided reading groups. We can do group discussions. It's actually a really neat way to be able to include kids at home and kids in the classroom in discussion groups. We have software that we've purchased for the district. We actually originally purchased it thinking about network filtering and making sure that students' internet was not was only going to school-safe sites when we were loaning them devices that they would be taking home with them. But the software that we've purchased, GoGuardian, will let us actually see student screens. So let's say I have 20 students in my class. They could be, I could click on a tab and I would see every single screen in my classroom at once. And I can actually look and say, oh my goodness, this kiddo is, has been in this virtual field trip for 3 hours now. Come on, kiddo, come back to me. You can halt their screen and send them a little message that says, hey, leave the virtual field trip and come back to class. And they won't be able to do anything until they choose to do that. So it is neat in that we have some ability to put kids into small groups. Last spring, we worked really hard not to have Google Meets where there was no adult in the Google Meet, but that meant we couldn't do that breakout room concept, which made it really hard to have discussions in small groups. Well, with GoGuardian, we can say, okay, these 3 kids go into Google Meet A, these 4 kids go into Google Meet B, and the kids can click in their calendar and go into that meeting room, and we can still see what's going on there. So it's it's an added level of protection, and it lets us use some of the instructional models that we've worked so hard to get to. I am extremely proud of the teachers in our district, because when we said all the desks in rows facing forward, they said, no, that goes so far back in, pedagogically, we don't do that anymore. We've worked so hard to get away from that. And they immediately started to brainstorm ways that wouldn't look the same. And what it comes back down to is utilizing our computers and to get into some of those small groups that we've worked so hard to make our instruction look like that. So we will be together and remote simultaneously, and hopefully that will build the kids' capacity to do the remote learning piece in a really robust way when and if we end up in that situation again sometime this year. And I have to say, I have not yet heard a teacher who feels differently, and I certainly don't feel differently. I think this can be done extremely well in whatever form we have to do it. And even if we have to go to the extreme of remote learning, we feel really confident that we can do this extremely well. Now that we have the devices, now that we have some of the software that we need, now that we know what works and doesn't work, and we have student feedback about what works and doesn't work, and parent feedback, we feel very confident that regardless of the model, we can really provide an excellent education for our students. And actually, we're getting to do some groundbreaking things that we hadn't been able to do, sort of like when we were talking in the strategic plan conversation. There's a level of creativity that's come out of the constraints here that has forced us to do things that would have been really hard to do if we said, hey, we really want to do it this way. People would have said, no, that's too scary. But we already jumped in and tried it. So let's go ahead and do it. And so there's a lot of good that can come from this. And I feel really proud of the models that we're creating. I'm sure you have questions. I'd rather answer your questions.
And if you have questions on special ed and special education IEPs, that's also built into this plan. And Mrs. Bai is with us to answer those too.
So this is for Kathy. Any contraindications that you see with returning to the district with students with special needs?
I think we can manage it. We will have some students due to health concerns. We heard it at PPTs in the spring that even if we come back, we're going to, keep our child home. We're seeing it work really well this summer. It's a small group, but it's managing just fine.
And how do you react? This has come up even for the CABE board chairs about students that come to school with a mask, but they don't want to keep it on, and you get into behavioral situations where then you have a teacher who needs to sort of handle somebody physically, and how does that play itself out?
And we will have some kids and we do this summer, where we have to remind them, hey, up over your nose or whatever. Or we're saying, all right, time for a little break, and we go outside just to give them a break from the mat. So yeah, there will be that. There'll be a fair amount of teaching and reminding.
Yeah, that I don't have any question about. My question is more behaviorally. There's some kids that really, may not want to wear the mask and won't wear them at school.
Right.
In with them, and then how does the district respond to that? Do they say, sorry, you're going to have to go home because you're not wearing a mask?
So the staff will need to be wearing their face shields and have other mitigating. So the same, this summer I have a student who cannot wear a mask due to medical reasons. So that all the staff wear the face shield.
Mm-hmm.
So you have other.
Medically, I understand. I'm talking about more like behaviorally. Students are like, I don't want to wear this. So do parents know if a student is not going to be wearing their mask at school that they go home?
Well, that was discussed today at our special ed meeting. It's not only for students with IEPs. There may be other students whose families don't believe in wearing masks and all that. And we have to decide as a district how we're going to handle those. We don't want to be getting into discipline over masks, but we are going to have to decide how to keep people safe and how to reach that balance.
Oh, thanks.
Kathy, quick question.
Mhm.
I think I'm muted. Oh, I'm
No,
not.
I hear you.
You're
I hear
good.
you.
So if a student doesn't wear a mask because they have a medical reason, can we issue a face mask? I mean, a shield is what I meant.
Yes, yes. So this summer, all of the staff have face shields because I do have a student there who cannot wear a mask. So they do wear the face shield all day.
The student will wear the shield.
Oh, can the student?
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, the student can also, yes.
Okay, thanks. And Kath, I know there's different kinds of shields, so does the shield go all the way down for staff member down to the chin?
Yes. Yeah, down to here.
Yeah, thanks.
There are specific plans, which I'm sure you had a chance to read, regarding how we're doing physical education. We're going to change up our curriculum significantly. There's going to be a lot of yoga and Pilates and running and very few games that involve balls being tossed back and forth. Same thing with art and music, because you have to increase distance when you're talking about singing. Because obviously you're projecting. And so there's a significant distance increase. It's 12 plus feet between and among all participants. So we will be looking at working with our smaller musical groups this fall and giving them spaces in which to appropriately distance. And with art, as I said, sharing of equipment is minimized, wearing of gloves is maximized. And then there is a whole section on attendance and discipline. And really, I think the state's intent in asking us to talk about that is they don't want us to be punitive with families who are temporarily keeping their children home. They want us to work with families who may have either health issues for their children or for other family members who have concerns. This has been an anxiety-producing situation, and so we're going to be working with students on that and working to train our staff in those opening days to work with students, particularly around this issue and these issues. So those plans are documented, and again, I expect that we will be honing them as we work with students, fine-tuning them. And there may be some policy implications for the Board of Education in the coming weeks and months. Fortunately, we did some policy work last year that I think is still relevant, not the least of which is giving the superintendent the opportunity to enter into agreements with employee unions, because there's a lot of that going on right now. And that's going to move quickly, and that may also change periodically. But I do see places where we might want to talk about some policies as we move forward.
Jan, I have a question.
Yes.
Two questions. One is related to physical education, especially with, I mean, is there, I know you can't be omniscient about this, but is there a potential for the state to remove requirements for physical education credits because of all the restrictions that have been placed on, fitness clubs, et cetera? And I mean, I think it's great that you guys have explored more creative solutions, but I mean, is there a chance that they're going to say, hey, you know what, all those requirements to have gym credits, you don't have to worry about that for the near term?
Yeah, there's been no talk of it yet, but I nothing will surprise me anymore. I mean, when the 180 days becomes reduced, that's something I never thought I'd see. We tried that with Hurricane Irene and Hurricane Sandy, and that never worked. So it's entirely possible that they will revisit that. I'm certainly going to ask them to think about their community service requirements. Because we lowered ours already to the state level, but I really think they need to consider that at least this year's graduating class and perhaps beyond may not be able to accomplish that.
Certainly.
So
my other question is related to discipline, and that is with respect to intentionally disregarding the requirements. I mean, you have done a lot of work to create a plan that supports safety and learning. And, I know there's a section on discipline, but has there been consideration given to what sort of actions associated with violating these expectations would merit some discipline?
we still have to have discussion around that, but the starting point for me is to understand that the state is saying this is a requirement for opening. And so that means it is a requirement for us to insist that people in our facilities wear masks whenever they can't be isolated, like me in my office, or someone behind their desk all alone. So that is a requirement. How we're going to respond to it is going to be tricky, and I'll tell you what makes it tricky. Our leaders, and I'm not getting political, but our leaders can't seem to come together on this topic, and I think mixed messages have caused some people to respond in a way that's counter to the medical advice that I have been given. And so I'm hoping that the messaging will be more uniform at the upper levels, so they will help us explain to students why this is so important. Absent that, we will do our job to say to everybody, as you walk through the doors of our schools, you need to wear a mask. If advice changes, we will change our stand on it, but that is our stand right now. And obviously, with those exceptions that Mrs. Bai and Eileen Baker were just talking about, the medical exceptions. Family support and communication, section 11. This is a lot about communication. We have set up a number of email addresses on it. Originally, we had a school close down email. Now we have a back to school email. We keep sharing that with families, and they are using it. I'm very happy to see them. What's great is there are about 4 or 5 of us manning it. And so we can just send it off to the right person when we get a question. They can be anything from a very general question to clarification question to a how do I enroll my child at Old Saybrook Middle School. So it's a great clearinghouse tool, and it gives people an opportunity to quickly get in touch with somebody and get some information when they need it. We've been putting out, as I said, the emails. We're now going to be putting out videos. We did hold parent meetings in the spring. We're going to hold parent meetings again. Some will be run by me or other people at central office. Others will be from the building level. They may go to the teacher level. So the one good thing is we've all gotten good at this platform, and we can all participate this way. And so it can be very inclusive. I'm hoping it'll help us with the strategic planning process as well. Mrs. Bai has been working with a team since April on socio-emotional well-being. I've been fortunate enough to be participating in a team at the state level. They just produced a draft of a document that just came out today that is supposed to be help and guidance in this area. But we are going to be spending time as we come back in the fall. Those 4 half days are ideal. Getting to know each other again, getting to know where each of us is as we go through this situation, how it has touched our lives, some of us more personally than others of us. And how to come together to feel like a community. I think that if we can do that work early on, take the time to do that work, we'll build relationships and rapport. We'll put kids back together again. And then if and when we are in a closed down situation, that work will already, the groundwork will already have been laid, and students will feel connected. And it's the disconnect that scares me the most with our kids. The longer we're not with each other, the more disconnected they may feel, and that's concerning. So we're going to spend time. We're going to spend time that typically would have been devoted to academics in those first few days, and devote that time to reconnecting and helping people feel safe. We're going to let Trent Gerbers use his GoPro cameras and walk us through the halls to show us what it's going to feel and look like when kids come back, so they can actually go through the halls without going through the halls, so it won't feel strange to them.
Been polishing up my toys, so I'm ready to roll.
His archive of toys, yes.
Jan, with those first few days of professional development, will that be done remotely because not all staff can fit in one building?
No, it will not be done remotely. It'll be done in the buildings. Our convocation probably most likely will be remote. So we will not pull together in one big group at the high school. We'll stay in our buildings. Whether or not meetings are done in large groups, probably not. We'll probably ask them to participate from their classrooms. What's nice about that is between meetings, which could be conducted online, but in the building, you can work in your classroom or get your lesson set up or work in your Google Classroom. So we'll have people in the buildings, but big group meetings won't take place.
I just didn't know if all middle school teachers could fit into the middle school auditorium. I don't think they can. I'm not sure.
Pretty big auditorium, that's probably true, but it's probably not necessary.
Okay, especially with social distancing.
Right. That will continue to grow too. We'll grow our family support communication and our response to needs as we get information. We have done multiple surveys this spring. We've learned how people were feeling then. We need to do that again as the year begins to open to understand where people are. And as you might imagine, it ran the gamut from get these schools open. We want kids to go back to school to I'm afraid and I don't want to send my child back. And so it's our work of the next few weeks to keep explaining this plan to people so people realize we've tried to think of everything and we're also taking suggestions and ideas. And I have to say for anybody who might be listening tonight, thank you to the parents and the students and staff who have offered ideas, offered solutions, and some people have done a lot of legwork to help us. The career and technical education is just how about the state recognizes that that's one of those situations that's hard to do. We don't want people sharing computers, but certain programs like CAD are only loaded on certain computers in certain classrooms. So there'll be a lot of cleaning. There'll be a lot of every other seat spacing. When we have to share equipment, again, there'll be disinfecting. We have culinary classes. And so lots of gloves, lots of cleaning. Lots of commitments to make sure that there isn't interaction between cohorts. And the last section, 13, is on staffing and personnel. Again, this answers the questions that were asked about what do we do if staff have health problems or other problems and cannot come back to work for a period of time. These mostly, they are all federal laws. They interact with each other to provide opportunities for people to be out. I do know that some people will choose to retire. Some will choose to resign. And I'm not just talking Old Saybrook. I'm saying I anticipate this will happen across the state and the nation. I think it's pushing some people who may have thought, I can another year or 2 years and they're leaving. It's sad to see people end their career on this note. But I certainly appreciate and understand why they would make that decision. And we're posting as quickly as possible when we get retirements. So that's all in place. There are protections in place. I have asked, CAPS, a group of us at CAPS put together an ask to have the medical model used in education. We have people who have nearly finished their degrees. Why can't we do what medicine did and ask them out into the profession a little bit early, give them a mentor to work with them, put them in classrooms to make up for the lost staffing. I don't know that will be a problem in Old Saybrook. Again, we're blessed because we're small, but I would imagine if you're a big district and you have hundreds of people who cannot return to the classroom, that might be a really big help. So that's something we're petitioning for as a group of superintendents. I figure if it worked for medicine, it might be able to be successful here with us. We're also asking for leniency on certain certifications. I'll give you an example. A science certification is highly specialized. Your physics or chemistry or earth science or biology. Yet we have some of those people have many, many courses in another subject, another science. We're looking for the state to help us out there wherever possible so we can staff our rooms appropriately. Lots of professional learning. Again, there's cost associated with that. From everything as mundane as washing hands to as sophisticated as how to help students who have experienced loss. And we will all be participating in that training. That is the plan as it exists today. It will probably look much like this when it goes forward to the State Department on Friday and gets put on our website and shared. As I said, the health department has it now. The emergency management team has it now. They may make suggestions and we will continue to add to it. For instance, one of the things that I know is going to happen the first week in August is there'll be a meeting with emergency management about school safety. Obviously, we're using more doors to go in and out. So we've locked our schools down now. They are locked. They are keyed. You have to have a pass to get in and out. But in order to keep kids cohorted, we have to change that up. So we'll be working with emergency management to make sure that that is done as safely as possible. We have the advantage of having school resource officers in each of our schools. Not every school district has that. So that's an opportunity for us to have additional vigilance outside when cohorts are moving to their classrooms. I think that's everything. Our survey results are the majority of people plan to send their children back to school at this time. Those who are saying they're uncertain, which is running about 32%, are saying they want to see what the plan is and they want to see where the data is when schools open. You know, how are things going? And then about 7% total are saying under no circumstances do they intend to send their children back to school. That's now for all of those folks. I know that that's subject to change as well. Transportation, I gave you those numbers earlier, and before and after school care, I gave you those numbers earlier. So we've got some good data to work with, thanks to the many, many parents who responded to our surveys. But we will keep communicating with them and keep surveying them throughout the year to help us continue to refine this plan. And on behalf of everybody who worked on this report, I thank you for listening. I know that was long, but it's a very important document. And I hope you feel like you've had an opportunity to ask questions and think about this. It'll be posted on Friday for the general public to look at, and it is iterative. I know I've said that multiple times. I just want to be sure that that's clear. I expect it to continue to change, and it will constantly be posted and submitted to the state.
Amazing, amazing, amazing work. And everyone, I mean, considering when you guys started this process, it really wasn't that long ago. And this is, I can appreciate what a massive amount of work this is. So, you know, I commend you guys on the investment that you made in this document.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's patience. It really was less than a month that we worked on this. But, you know, everyone's anxious to see it. And I know, though, that when we publish it, there'll continue to be questions. So we'll continue to put ourselves out there and allow people an opportunity to talk to us.
This is George.
Go ahead, George.
So I have a general question about the plan or actually the process. And so, again, I mean, fantastic amount of work and a very nice plan. But, you know, it almost doesn't matter what a plan is, something will come up. Mm-hmm. And so the general question is there an indemnity for school or liability waiver, essentially, right? It's basically saying, look, we did the best we can, but this is it, right? And we have to have some sort of indemnity going forward, right?
There's not.
Wonderful.
The answer to that is there's something called government immunity, which does allow a certain layer of protection. And I was also told, please don't worry, you're not personally liable. You're liable as a group. And I said, not really helpful, but thank you. But that was the answer we were given. Government immunity and liable as an organization, not personally liable. So I think our best defense is to follow the state's guidelines and the CDC plans as closely as possible, because obviously that would be our way of defending our decision making, that we stuck to the plan, which is why when we get to that mask question, that becomes such a significant issue. Because all the plans call for us to wear masks, anyone over the age of 2. So that's everybody we work with. And that's going to become, hopefully the high school students I was talking to said they believe that the kids get why we have to ask them to wear masks. And they believe that for the majority of them won't give us a hard time about it. So that's good to hear. And I think the staff certainly is committed to it from what we hear from them. So hopefully we'll just have a few people that we need to convince the importance of putting on a mask as you walk through our doors. Good question, though. And ask.
Other questions for Jan and the team? It was that thorough, Jan.
Wow, good. Well, and thanks to the team,
Yeah.
the three people you see here tonight, and all the people that worked with them, and our principals. It's truly amazing.
It's a lot to absorb, for sure.
Yeah.
And Jan, is there a way to see the videos that would be shared with families?
So they're on our Facebook page. If you have Facebook, they're on our website, on the COVID-19 section of the website, Trent.
Just the hand washing
Right.
now.
Hand washing. We're doing teasers. It's like trailers for a movie. We're doing hand washing first, then we're going to wait 24 hours and do the next one. But there are 3 ready to go out.
Twitter also.
Okay.
And Twitter also.
You know, I actually did have a question, Jan, on your surveys. The one thing I didn't pull from here, and maybe I missed it, is what was the percentage of respondents? So did we get like an 80% total response rate, or 90, or?
We didn't write that down. It was 573 respondents out of 740 potential families.
Okay.
I would call that, I thought it was a very good return rate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was trying to do the math in my head, and I wasn't quite sure, but I was impressed with the return rate, just from or not even so much the return rate, but from an answering perspective.
Right.
You know, it's so hard to get people to answer surveys.
Right. And we had some people answer it 4 and 5 times. So we had to pull that information out. But we did have a really good response rate. We originally up over 600. We realized we had 4 and 5 responses from the same person, same email address. And I'm hoping that some people just misunderstood our directions and thought they had to answer it for each child. But when the answers were all the same, we counted that once. We're very excited at that response rate. What's really interesting too, statistically, is when we only had about 120 responses, the percentage of the answers was still the same. So throughout the process, I think we've got a pretty good reflection of how people were really feeling in that moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I probably answered twice because I have a really bad memory. So
that's okay.
It was probably me. Sorry about that.
It's all right. Today I couldn't remember what day it was or who
Yeah,
I
exactly.
had called. So
it's still Tuesday. I just found that out. It's still Tuesday. Darn it. Not Friday. So no, excellent. Other questions for Jan and the team before we move on? All right. Well, thank you guys very much, all of you, especially the folks in attendance tonight, for coming to the meeting in the middle of your summer. And certainly to all the people who've spent their summer putting this together. It's certainly greatly appreciated.
Tara, I just wanted to say really congratulations to Jan and her team, because it's massive. It's huge.
Massive.
And it's unprecedented, and it's very specific. And just like the way Jan and Amity and Kathy and Julie do their work, so they'll have a chance to see what needs to be changed or modified and keep us in the loop.
we certainly will. The pedal is still to the floor because obviously we're still hanging the details on everything, finishing up that distance learning, getting professional development going, getting the buildings finalized and refinalized and refinalized. Kathy is doing intensive work with individual students and families, and that will continue throughout the summer and into the beginning of the year.
All right, so with that, let's move on to our academic calendar discussion.
And this will require a vote. And I've really talked so much about it already, the intent of it. You have two calendars. And one is for if schools are closing, and I'll explain, I think I'll do that one second. And the other one is for open or hybrid. Either way, our original calendar that you had approved for this year had 2 professional development days at the beginning, and then we started school on August 31st. we are asking to move a professional development day from November 2nd and put it at the beginning of the year and have the first day for students be the 1st. In addition, we're asking that first week, the 1st through the 4th, be all half days for the reasons I said earlier. Warmer weather, get students used to mask wearing, get teachers used to it, give teachers additional time for training, setting up their Google Classrooms, their regular classrooms. Just give people an easier way into the year.
Yes,
And
Jan, your memo says through September 3rd, but it's
through the 4th.
September
It should say
4th.
the 4th. I apologize, Karen.
Okay, okay.
The memo
Makes sense.
changes. The 4th was always.
Oh, right. The 4th was already a half day. That's why the memo says the 3rd. The 4th was a half day on the original calendar too,
Okay.
but that wouldn't be obvious. Now you might ask, why not the 3rd? The 3rd is election day. I'm assuming, I don't know, that we may have elections still in our schools. We may not. But so we didn't want students in school with people coming into our buildings. And nothing else changes in that open hybrid calendar. Everything else is the same. The draft closed calendar is exactly the same as the open hybrid calendar. So moving one professional development day from the 2nd of November to the 31st of August, adding the half days there, 1st through the 3rd, and keeping the one on the 4th. The only other change is in any month where we're closed. So that means we'd be in total distance learning. Instead of having a half day once a month on a Friday, we'll have a half day once a month on a Wednesday. The reason why we've always done these half days on a Friday is transportation related. It also is a little less disruptive to families. Since we're all going to be in a distance learning mode, we picked Wednesday. We think teachers will be more fresh on a Wednesday to do some meaningful professional development. And it really will have very little impact on what's going on in people's homes. So that's really the only significant difference between the two.
Jan?
Yep.
Is it St. John's aligned? Have you been communicating with St. John's and their scheduling?
I absolutely have. Yep. Once a week, Mother Elaine and I are in a meeting together, and we talked about this calendar and our hybrid plan and our reopening plan. So she knows about it.
Okay, so are they required to submit the same action plans that public schools are?
I don't know the answer to that question. I doubt it very much, but
Yeah,
I do know that
probably not.
Mother Elaine is doing a lot similar to what we're doing.
Okay.
We've been fortunate. We've been on a townwide committee and we meet every Thursday. So she's been engaged in that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I also want to say that the providers in our community, many of them have asked to be on our family email list, so they get our family emails. So I know Montessori does. I know Beach Babies does. They weren't, but now they are. So they can stay informed that way too.
Okay, thank you.
So Jan, I have to admit, I apologize. I was a little confused by this. So these calendars reflect that should we transition, should we have a need because we've gone into one of those situations that require we move to a hybrid model, this is the calendar that would be implemented? And or if we move into a situation where school is closed, we would implement the closed calendar?
Only one change to what you said. The first one that says hybrid is for a full open or hybrid.
Or hybrid. So all things being as optimal as we anticipate,
Right.
that option number 1 becomes the new academic calendar,
Right.
pending approval tonight.
Right. And so students would start on September 1st rather than the 31st of August. We're front loading.
So that's really what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Front loading professional development.
Right.
Other questions?
Is there a possibility to go from hybrid to closed and back, or open to closed and back to open?
Oh,
I guess at some point it doesn't matter because the calendar looks the same.
So the calendar would be the same. The closed one just says in any month that we're closed, we're going to move a PD half day from Friday to Wednesday. So minimal
Right.
impact.
It just switches it. Yeah,
Yep.
good. Thank you. Boy, am I glad you can figure that out.
it actually took a small army, quite honestly. And everybody had to look at it. What do you think? What do you think?
So is the board ready to vote on this at this point, or are there more questions? I'm going to take that we're ready to vote then. Can I get a motion to approve amending the 2020-2021 academic calendar?
Make a motion, Alan?
Thank you, Alan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Eileen. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved. And with that, just reminders, we have a Board of Education presenting to the Board of Finance. The date on the agenda is actually wrong. The correct date, I believe, is August 4th.
Right. Yeah, that's been moved.
So more to follow on that. And our first regular meeting of the Board of Education, September 8th. And there'll be more to follow about how we're going to conduct our meetings, as the date gets closer. I know some of you had questions about whether we'd meet in person or how that was going to work out. So more to follow about that. And if there is nothing else, then I would like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Eileen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so moved. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining our special meeting, and thank you to all of our guest players this evening. And we'll see you all soon, hopefully.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Good care. Thank you.
Aye. Thank you.
Good night.